The chanting was grand and powerful. It was like the murmuring of the gods. It grew louder and louder. The cavern was shaking as the chanting filled the entire world. The Nirvana scripture. Long Chen's heart shook. He hadn't done anything and wasn't the one who had activated the Nirvana scripture. It was the Nirvana scripture that had automatically activated itself. Back in the pill tower when he had obtained the Nirvana scripture, he had used it to resist the suppression of the cry of the heavenly Daos even without the divine ring. Its power was incredibly great. But once he had left the pill tower and abandoned his identity as Long San, he had no longer needed to conceal the divine ring. So he hadn't used the Nirvana scripture again. Although the Nirvana scripture was powerful, it was greatly lacking compared to the divine ring. But now it had appeared on its own. All of Long Chen's spiritual yuan and attention was focused on controlling the raging flame prison. He hadn't had the slightest bit of energy left over to activate the Nirvana scripture. As the Nirvana scripture activated, the chanting grew more and more resounding. Long Chen suddenly noticed that the raging flame prison, which had been on the verge of collapsing, had suddenly begun to grow stronger. Its runes grew brighter and brighter. The Nirvana scripture can actually draw out all the flame energy in the world for me to use. Long Chen suddenly realized that he had underestimated the pill tower's sacred flame cannon. He hastily formed hand seals, supporting the raging flame prison. At the same time, he also began to chant. Although he didn't know the scripture's meaning, when he had cultivated the Nirvana scripture, that sound was deeply imprinted in his head. He was unable to forget it even if he tried, and he felt a subtle closeness toward it. His voice wasn't the slightest bit sluggish as he chanted. The words just floated out of him. As he chanted, the chanting in the air grew even louder. The flame energy of the world flowed toward the raging flame prison. It grew stronger and stronger, no longer seeming on the verge of breaking. Flame prison death blow. Long Chen was excited as he activated the death blow form. The raging flame prison instantly shrank, compressing the 8-arm horned devil. As it shrank, the 3-meter 8-arm horned devil was also forced to shrink. Its skin had already begun to char this time, and black layers of it began to shed. When that skin shed, it instantly turned to ash. As that skin fell, Long Chen suddenly noticed a mass of runes where the 8-arm horned devil's flesh should be. That was a slight secret to how this puppet had been made. Those runes should be the crux of how the 8-arm horned devil had maintained 80% of its power, while also retaining some of its battle instinct. Long Chen continued to chant the Nirvana scripture as he compressed the raging flame prison. Heaven and earth raged. The flame prison's power continued to increase. The 8-arm horned devil was now just compressed into a 5-foot cube. It was impossible to tell its original figure anymore. Boom. Finally, the 8-arm horned devil was compressed to the peak and exploded. Its flesh and runes had only just erupted when they were burned to ash. The runes were instantly ignited with flames, and a piercing burning smell gushed forth. Long Chen also collapsed on the ground and fainted. This time, he had harshly overdrafted his spiritual yuan and spiritual strength. If the Nirvana scripture hadn't appeared in the end and let him see some hope, he probably wouldn't have been able to endure for so long. Even unconscious, he felt like 1,000,000 needles were stabbing into his head. He was filled with pain. He knew this was a self-protective instinct of the soul. It was using this pain to provoke him, not letting him enter a state of quasi-death. If his soul did enter a quasi-death state, then it would be impossible to awaken without some outside force. Furthermore, in that state, his spiritual strength might completely run out. Then he would really die. After an unknown amount of time, Long Chen opened his eyes. The cavern was still there, but that fierce 8-arm horned devil was gone. His head still hurt intensely. He consumed a soul-nourishing pill to alleviate the pain. However, his body was still in a weak and feeble state. It was like he was ill. That was a symptom of overdrafting his spiritual yuan, but that wasn't something he was worried about. Overdrafting spiritual yuan wasn't as bad as overdrafting spiritual strength. Consuming some yuan qi pills as well as some complementary pills, Long Chen's pale face gradually grew rosier. After 2 hours, he was capable of standing and walking. That really was too dangerous. Fuck, I'm stupid. The quality between ancient and current cultivators is ridiculously great. Even peak experts in the current era were nothing in the ancient era. I don't even know if my power can count as average, sighed Long Chen. He felt regret. This mistake had almost cost him his life. That 8-armed horned devil had been too powerful. Long Chen also experienced just how powerful the ancient experts had to have been. It was unexpected that it would be the Nirvana scripture that saved him in the end. It seemed he would have to study it in the future. A scripture that could be considered a sacred canon by the Pill Tower definitely had to have extraordinary origins. Taking a deep breath, Long Chen checked his body over and became delighted. While he had been unconscious, something had happened to the Enlightenment Palace star, and it had entered the 8th star transformation. That was 3 advancements. It was just 1 step from reaching the peak. Then he would be able to summon the true 4-color divine ring and 4-star battle armor. Before the Enlightenment Palace star reached the 9th star transformation, the battle armor he was summoning was more accurately the 3-star battle armor. It was stronger than the original 3-star battle armor, but when compared to the power of the true 4-star battle armor after the 9th star transformation, the difference was like that between heaven and earth. Just thinking about such an intense upgrade made him feel endless excitement. Although it hasn't reached the peak, each advancement increases my power a great deal. However, he knew that he probably wouldn't have a chance to make such explosive gains in the future. Even now, he didn't know what energy this trial was blessing him with for the Enlightenment Palace star to be able to absorb it. But there was one discovery Long Chen made. When the Enlightenment Palace star absorbed that energy, it didn't directly absorb it. Instead, it first transformed it into another kind of energy. During that process, a portion of the original energy was rejected, while the other was absorbed by the Enlightenment Palace star. Although he only knew that little, it was a good sign. In the future, he would be more attentive. Perhaps he would be able to find more kinds of energy other than medicinal energy that could be absorbed. The 9-star transformations became more difficult the closer they got to the end. The number of medicinal pills required could only be described as an ocean's worth. If that energy had to be absorbed relying only on the mouth, it really would be unbearable. That's right, where's the reward? Where's the flying rainbow? Long Chen suddenly thought of the reward. Having almost lost his life just now, it seemed now was the time to reap the rewards. Carefully looking around, he suddenly noticed that a path had opened in a wall. Walking through it, he saw a sword lying on an exquisite platform. It was an extremely simple sword. An ancient aura washed over him once he got closer. The sheath didn't have any runes decorating it, and the hilt was also very simple. There didn't seem to be any extra craftsmanship. It was just an extremely primitive sword. When he unsheathed it, there was also nothing extraordinary about it. The sword's body even seemed a bit dim, and there were some speckles on it as if it had rusted. There were also scratches that looked like someone had used sandpaper on it. It looked very worn down. But Long Chen immediately saw that it wasn't ordinary. Although those speckles and scratches made it clearly look like an unremarkable old sword, his vision had surpassed others. Through those speckles and scratches, he saw countless runes that were practically impossible to notice with the naked eye. Those speckles and scratches were actually formed of runes. But those runes were too small, so small that they were almost impossible to notice. If Long Chen hadn't known that this was a treasure item, he really might have been tricked. He slowly sent his spiritual yuan inside it. Those speckles and scratches lit up, and a faint layer of light appeared over the sword. He lightly swung it. As a result, it was like space was cut through, and a light sound rang out. He was practically unable to sense any spatial resistance. The thing that made Long Chen the most delighted was that when the sword's edge met the wall, that incomparably sturdy wall was cut through cleanly. What a sharp blade! Long Chen let out a startled cry. The walls here all had formations supporting them. Even in his fight against the 8-armed horned devil, he hadn't been able to break them. But this sword cut through them like they were tofu. Carefully examining the sword, he found that once he scattered his spiritual yuan, the sword returned to its shoddy appearance. Hee, it's very similar to my own temperament. Dressing like the pig to eat the tiger, laughed Long Chen. Flipping the sword, he saw two immortal characters on the other side. Flying Rainbow. So you're the treasure item, Flying Rainbow. Hee hee, I'll be relying on you in the future, laughed Longchen. All his previous regret and depression vanished like smoke. Currently, his spiritual yuan was too limited. He wasn't able to investigate more of Flying Rainbow's secrets. Thus, he left that for later. Suddenly, the platform that Flying Rainbow was on descended. A large gate appeared and light came from the other side. Longchen laughed. He could finally leave. But then once he entered, he was dumbfounded. He had actually entered another cavern. But what was inconceivable was that this cavern was hundreds of miles wide. He had only just entered when he saw a beam of light in front of him. Within that beam was a figure. Longchen's heart sank to an all-time low. What? There's another level? Countless spirit stones were shining, lighting up the entire room as if the sun were shining. Although he was still underground, this place looked as luxurious as a palace. There were 108 white jade pillars throughout the room. The ceiling was a mile high and shaped like a pointed dome. The spirit stones in the ceiling were like stars, but they were much brighter. A beam of light was shining down from the center of the ceiling. Within that 30-meter-thick beam of light, there was a single figure standing. It didn't give off any fluctuations, thus, Longchen wasn't able to sense anything about it. He didn't dare to move. The 8-armed horned devil had truly made him worried. He was worried that he would accidentally activate this level. Then he really would be doomed. But countless runes suddenly lit up on the 108 pillars. Rays of light shot out from them toward Longchen. Longchen was appalled and he hastily tried to dodge. But those rays were too fast and had come without warning. He was struck before being able to react. Just as he thought he was dead, endless energy poured from the light into his body. His spiritual yuan and spiritual strength instantly reached their peaks. What? Longchen was stunned. This time, he had harshly overdrafted his power. Without 10 to 15 days, it would have been impossible for him to completely recover. But this light released endless energy into his body, allowing him to instantly reach his peak. It was like he had been completely reborn. It was practically miraculous. Feeling that endless energy surging within him, Longchen felt like his power was overflowing. He even had an urge to once more fight the 8-armed horned devil. Currently, his Enlightenment Palace star had reached the 8th star transformation, and he had Flying Rainbow now. His power had greatly risen, and he wouldn't be afraid of facing the 8-armed horned devil again. Just as he was filled with confidence, a stone slab rose out of the ground in front of him. There were 2 identical buttons on top of it. The 108 pillars once more released light, creating a screen on top of the stone slab. There were words in that light screen. From the start until now, a total of 8,736 people have challenged the 9th and final level. Seeing that, Longchen jumped. The 8th level had a 9 in 1,000 chance of success. How could there have been so many people to challenge the 9th level? Could it be? If there was a 9 in 1,000 pass rate, then the number of people who had participated in this trial was ridiculous. 10,000 people meant 90 people had passed, 100,000 meant 900, and wouldn't that mean that over 1 million people had managed to reach the 8th level before? Thinking of that number, Longchen was both shocked and amazed. Just what kind of era had that been? It was truly too terrifying. He hastily continued reading. Up to now, only 3 people have managed to pass this level. The others all failed. This is a life and death level. Victory is life, defeat is death. There is no room for leeway. Your opponent will be extremely powerful. Be careful, very careful. Longchen cursed. Fuck, what a hateful phrase. Be careful, very careful? Last time I was almost conned to death by you. He continued to read. This level's difficulty is terrifying to the peak. Countless heavenly geniuses have fallen because of it, which is why it is not included in the main path of the immemorial path. Those who could come here are all either extremely lucky or extremely unlucky. But a cultivator's motivation is a heart to get stronger. That motivation is also the blade that takes their life. Cultivators must maintain a reverent heart. This level's reward is a heaven-earth spirit source which was condensed by the purest energy of heaven and earth. By using it, there is a 10% chance of mutating a person's spirit root, reviving the spirit blood, and giving birth to a spirit bone. This heaven-earth spirit source is one of the immemorial path's 7 supreme treasures. It is exceptionally precious. For those who are greedy or brave, be careful, very careful. Mutate the spirit root, revive the spirit blood, and even allow an expert to create a spirit bone? Was that extremely precious? In the Xiantian Dao sex trial, through the reincarnation mirror's projection, he had already seen a glimpse into his past. He knew he had a special spirit root, a divine spirit bone, and supreme spirit blood. He had always thought that those weren't so amazing. But now seeing these lines, it seemed he had misjudged his original talent. His spirit root, spirit blood, and spirit bone had all been extracted. He had thought that it was just a cruel reprisal. But now it seemed he had been thinking too simply. Even in the immemorial path's golden era, a heaven-earth spirit source that could transform a cultivator's original talent was one of the supreme treasures of the whole path. There definitely had to be secrets here that he was unaware of. Damn it, are you trying to entice me again? You want me to reconstruct what I had? This time I won't be fooled. Longchen laughed. The treasure was definitely enticing. But first he would have to keep his life. That 8-armed horned devil had already almost taken his life. This time, Long Chen had learned his lesson. The immemorial path's trials were for those ancient experts, and they were frighteningly difficult. The current age had already declined. Although Long Chen found this to be a bit unsatisfactory, he had to admit that there was an insurmountable wall between the current geniuses and the ancient ones. Therefore, he calmed himself down and continued reading. If you don't want to participate in this level, you can press the first button and you will be transported back to the entrance of the trial. As expected, this level was too difficult. It was clearly discouraging people from trying to challenge it. But people were all curious and competitive. The more they put it this way, the more people desired to test it out. This discouragement was really no different from encouragement. That was especially true to those prideful heavenly geniuses. If they didn't try it, it would be a humiliation. Long Chen had never considered himself to be a heavenly genius, nor would he go risk his life for some idiot face. He looked inside the light beam where you could see a single human figure. However, it was impossible to tell if it was male or female, nor was it possible to see how strong it was. His spiritual strength was unable to enter the light. The most interesting thing was that even the 9-star Hegemon body art wasn't able to sense any threat from that figure. It was like it was just an ordinary person. Goodbye, brother. I won't be accompanying you. Long Chen smiled and pressed the first button. A light click rang out. You've chosen to fight. The level begins now. Just at this moment, a mechanical voice rang throughout the room. Long Chen's face turned green and he roared, "What the fuck? I chose to give up." But as soon as he said that, he became dumbfounded. There had been 2 buttons, one to the left and one to the right. He had pressed the left one. He suddenly recalled that the words in the light screen had been written right to left. In other words, in ancient times, the first button was the right one. Long Chen felt his head buzzing. His hair stood on end. How could he have neglected such an important point? He had actually chosen this ultimate level that would definitely kill him. 8,736 peak heavenly geniuses of ancient times had challenged this ultimate level, but only 3 had survived. This trial's difficulty must have far surpassed his imagination. He couldn't help but curse. What was with this damn word game? Why didn't it clearly indicate which was first and which was second? Long Chen didn't know how many of those 8,736 people had also been conned by this word game like him. At the same time, he recalled a certain line he had read. Those who could come here are all either extremely lucky or extremely unlucky. He felt like he was about to go crazy. It seemed he was always leaning toward the latter one, and immensely so. Whatever he tried to do, he would run into difficulty after difficulty. Nothing ever went smoothly. The room began to shudder. The 108 pillars suddenly shot rays of light at Long Chen. Being enveloped by that light, he was unable to move. Runes appeared in the air as he was enveloped by the light. Seeing those runes, Long Chen's expression changed. He was very familiar with those runes. In a moment, he recognized them to be his technique's runes. They included his battle skills and magical arts. There were even Huolong and Leilong's runes. Those runes flowed toward the central figure. What is going on? These pillars had actually duplicated his techniques and transmitted them to that figure. He hadn't been able to protect his runes at all. It was like he was naked in front of that light, and all his secrets were laid bare. He could clearly sense some energy probing his body, replicating all the techniques he had trained in. The Nirvana scripture. More runes floated out of his body. Those were the Nirvana scripture's runes. But they didn't flow away. Instead, they circulated around his body. No matter how the 108 pillars tried, they were unable to strip those runes from his body. As expected, the Nirvana scripture's origin is extraordinary. Even the Earth Flames runes and the Tribulation Lightning's runes had been duplicated without the slightest resistance. But the Nirvana scripture didn't allow it to happen to itself. The pillars released a blinding light. They looked like blazing suns now, but no matter how they tried, they were unable to duplicate the Nirvana scripture. After an incense stick's worth of time, the Nirvana scripture's runes faded back within him. Long Chen was surprised that the pillars would just give up like this. Long Chen still didn't move. But suddenly, his divine ring appeared behind him, and 4 stars involuntarily appeared in his eyes. Crap, it's trying to duplicate the 9-star he gem and body art. Long Chen suddenly had a bad feeling. But then he became astonished. The primal chaos bead had actually activated. A terrifying aura went through the rays of light enveloping him and directly struck the 108 pillars. Boom. The 108 pillars exploded. The entire room rocked back and forth. Long Chen was appalled. Previously, the stone pillars had failed to duplicate the Nirvana scripture. But when they had tried to duplicate the 9-star He-Gem body art, it was like they had directly provoked the primal chaos bead, and they were blown apart. But the light enveloping Long Chen faded, and the light beam enveloping the mysterious figure also grew dim. When he clearly saw that figure, Long Chen couldn't help being stunned. In front of Long Chen was a figure wearing black robes. Its starry eyes were electric. It was actually a doppelganger of him. It raised a blood-red saber as it icily looked at Long Chen. Seeing that movement, Long Chen hastily dodged to the side. A huge saber image missed him by a hair's breadth, shaking the ground. It was actually split the heavens. He had only just dodged when the doppelganger pointed its finger. A ray of lightning shot out. It was incomparably quick and timed perfectly. Long Chen smashed his fist forward. The lightning runes revolving over his fist clashed with the lightning arrow, and it exploded, sending Long Chen flying. He was horrified. This level was too ridiculous. It had actually duplicated his techniques and formed an even stronger version of himself. From that exchange, Long Chen had noticed that the doppelganger's thunder force was slightly stronger than his own. As he flew back, the doppelganger swung its saber 3 times. 3 saber images slashed toward him from 3 different angles. Even Blood Drinker has been duplicated. And isn't this move the 3-style parting wind? This move was clearly the Earth-class battle skill he had learned back in Phoenix Cry. Now it was used by the doppelganger, and its power was extremely impressive. It sealed any retreat paths mercilessly. At this moment, Long Chen wanted to dodge, but he couldn't. His opponent's moves were too refined. In truth, that was another him, and so it understood him. It was precisely because it understood him that he felt a chill. His opponent's fighting style was incredibly vicious. Each slash of its saber left him with no room to maneuver. This was Long Chen's first time seeing how frightful he himself was. Whistling filled the air as the saber slashes crashed over him like sea waves. Suddenly, a sword came out of its sheath. Long Chen had no choice but to take out Flying Rainbow. It was unknown what the laws of this place were, but the doppelganger's saber was the same as Blood Drinker, and its power was also immense. It was no different from the original. Flying Rainbow danced through the air. Long Chen was delighted to see that this unremarkable sword was extraordinary once he inserted his spiritual yuan. There was practically no spatial resistance, allowing it to move at incredible speed. Suddenly, an explosive sound rang out. Long Chen and the doppelganger were both forced back a dozen meters, and it suddenly formed a hand seal, summoning a sea of gold around it. "Fuck, you really know how to steal," cursed Long Chen. That sea of gold was the hidden ground gold Spider King scales he had obtained in the first trial. He had been constantly nourishing them in his spiritual space. But even they had been duplicated. Those scales were like hail, shooting toward him. Long Chen knew that these scales were incredibly powerful once they were supported by spiritual strength. He didn't dare to tarry and also summoned his own golden scales. Boom! Two seas of gold crashed against each other. It was a truly spectacular sight. Just as they were crashing together, he suddenly felt a change in the air. He also heard the doppelganger's voice. "Raging flame prison." Countless flame runes condensed around Long Chen, rapidly forming a cage that trapped him. Long Chen's expression instantly changed. This fellow had not just duplicated his techniques, but also all his battle experience. It understood how to use the scales to hide itself and release a killing blow. Even he had fallen for it. "Raging flame prison." Long Chen also shouted and formed hand seals. His raging flame prison wrapped around himself. This wasn't an attack, but a defense. The enemy's raging flame prison had come too quickly. If Long Chen tried to use the raging flame prison to trap his opponent, with the doppelganger's battle experience, it wasn't very likely for him to be able to trap it. So he used it to instead protect himself. The two flame prisons crackled against each other. The outer flame prison was trying to compress, while the inner flame prison was trying to expand. This was a competition of power without any technique. Long Chen was appalled to see that his own flame prison was slowly being suppressed despite him pushing his spiritual yuan to its peak. His defensive range was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. He suddenly realized why so many of those peak heavenly geniuses had died here. It was because they were facing a duplicate of themselves that was slightly stronger in every aspect. All their moves were understood. All their battle experience and smarts were copied. This kind of battle could make a person despair. In less than an incense stick's worth of time, his flame prison had shrunk from 1,000 meters wide to less than 300 meters, and it was only continuing to grow smaller. Not only is it stronger than the original body, but it always remains in its peak state. It's not even getting tired. This is clearly impossible. Your opponent is stronger than you in every aspect and doesn't get tired. Also, it will not feel any negative emotions like panic, anxiety, or fear. But when a crack appears in the original's heart, the duplicate will immediately take advantage. That will lead to an instant defeat. This trial is impossible. No wonder this trial couldn't be placed on the main path. The failure rate is absolutely monstrous, so of course it had to be thrown to the side. This isn't a trial, but the giant con. Who could possibly defeat someone stronger than themselves who stays in their peak state? Raged Long Chen. No, that's wrong. Experts don't get stronger by walking around blockades. No matter how strong the opponent is, they have to be defeated through power. That's the only way to maintain an expert's heart. Just because my opponent is myself, am I supposed to lose the courage to win? If that's the case, then am I even a true expert? Long Chen suddenly realized something, and his eyes began to glow. He suddenly guessed this trial's goal. Defeating powerful enemies could temper a person's will and confidence. Then what would a person gain if they defeated a version of themselves that was stronger than them in every aspect? At this moment, Long Chen's raging flame prison was growing smaller and smaller, and his own breathing was growing a bit hurried. But he wasn't nervous. Instead, he had a faint smile. "Sorry, but I'll have to cheat a little before having a fair fight with you." Long Chen suddenly summoned the Nirvana scripture. Chanting filled the air, and endless flame energy entered the flame prison. It instantly began to expand. Boom! Once it grew to a size of 3,000 meters, the outer flame prison exploded. With the Nirvana scripture's assistance, the raging flame prison's power could leap to a whole new level. With the flame prison destroyed, Long Chen regained his freedom. But he didn't immediately attack. Instead, he looked at the doppelganger that looked exactly the same as him. I swear that even if I have to be killed, I won't use the Nirvana scripture nor the 9-star Hegemon body art. I want to have a fair fight with you. If I lose, it just proves that I'm useless. If I'm unable to defeat even you, how am I supposed to stand at the peak of the martial path? How am I supposed to find my parents? If I'm unable to defeat even you, how am I supposed to break through all the untold dangers and difficulties of the future? Am I supposed to abandon my family and live a life alone? Would that be any different than death? Am I supposed to watch my companions die while I can only just watch? If I had to endure that kind of pain and feeling of helplessness, would I still have the courage to keep living? I want to get stronger. I want to get stronger, so I will risk my life, truly putting my life on the line. Otherwise, the lives of those around me might vanish at any moment. So I can't die. Long Chen suddenly put away the Nirvana scripture and the raging flame prison. Wielding his sword, he finally took the initiative to attack his doppelganger. His eyes seemed to blaze with fire. He viewed his doppelganger as one of his shackles on his cultivation path. He had to personally break these shackles so that he could step into higher realms. If he used the Nirvana scripture or the divine ring or the battle armor, even if he defeated his doppelganger, it would leave a shadow on his heart. His undefeatable Tao heart would be tainted. He wasn't a perfectionist, but he knew the slightest contamination would be a hindrance as he continuously broke through to higher realms in the future. So to get stronger, he had no choice but to put his life on the line. He would use his own power to personally defeat himself. Boom boom boom. Long Chen continuously used his full strength with each move. All he focused on was to bring out all his power. He forgot his techniques, he forgot his magical arts, he even forgot about victory and defeat, and even his own life. His thoughts were entirely dedicated to killing his opponent. Blood splashed over and over. Long Chen was struck several times and heavily injured, but he ignored it. He fought crazily. He knew he couldn't allow himself to die, and he also knew he had to kill his opponent. Swordlight and saber images raged in the air as the cavern continuously shook, seeming like it might collapse at any moment. Boom! A large hole appeared in Long Chen's chest. His upper body was almost completely destroyed. But a smile appeared on his face. I won. His chest had been pierced, and his body was about to fall apart. One could even see bones sticking out from one of his shoulders and both thighs. It was a ghastly sight. But Long Chen's sword had pierced through his opponent's head. This was the result of Long Chen taking 2 nearly fatal injuries in the end. The figure exploded into runes, which then transformed into a ray of light that shot toward a wall. Lines lit up on that wall, and a door appeared. Long Chen collapsed on the ground. This battle had been too dangerous. Now that he had killed his opponent, he immediately went limp. He was this close to passing out. Long Chen hadn't used the Nirvana scripture or the divine ring or the battle armor. He also hadn't used the primal chaos bead's healing ability. Only now did he slowly draw out the life energy from the primal chaos space. His body began to heal. He smiled self-mockingly. I really am stupid. I actually had to compete with myself. But this is also good. It just once more proves that my theory is correct. In theory, a person could only use 100% of their power. But his theory was that this limit could be broken through willpower. In the Xiao tribe, Long Chen had used this theory to help Xiao Fei awaken. And what had occurred this time also validated his theory. If he had retreated at this time, it would have been a grave blow to his confidence. He probably wouldn't even be able to believe his own bragging in the future. So despite knowing it was foolish to the max, Long Chen had still chosen to use that exceedingly foolish method to challenge his limits. As a result, he had succeeded. When he had succeeded in killing another version of himself that was stronger in every aspect, his mental realm had immediately become crystal clear. That increase in mental realm would bring unimaginable benefits to his future cultivation. Good thing these spirit world trees have enough energy. Completely recovering only took 1/3 of their life energy. Looking at those slightly dispirited trees in the primal chaos space, Many emotions filled Long Chen. As expected, danger was directly proportional to profit. Those trees possessed shocking amounts of life energy, which was good, as his physical body had already reached an extremely powerful level. He wouldn't be easily injured, but once he was, it required a ridiculous amount of life energy to heal. Fine. I don't really need this hidden ground gold Spider King's corpse anyways. Long Chen thought about it and decided to toss the precious Spider King's corpse into the black soil as nutrients for the trees. Although there were many precious parts to the Spider King's corpse, the most valuable thing to Long Chen was the life energy it could offer. As its corpse sank into the black soil, endless life energy entered the dispirited trees. They once more began to flourish. But there were too many trees that were splitting the nutrients. They grew a bit, but they were still a ways off their peak state. Long Chen wasn't worried about that. Instead, he was happy. The larger the trees grew, the more life energy they could hold. He continued to rest for a bit. Although his body had recovered, his mind hadn't fully calmed itself after that heart-pounding battle. During that battle, he had used a hypnotic art on himself to make him see his doppelganger as his cultivation path's shackles. If he couldn't kill it, he couldn't grow and become an expert. If he was unable to become an expert, he would be unable to find his parents, let alone get revenge against whoever had harmed him. Furthermore, in the countless battles in the future, his brothers and sisters would die one by one. That had released a surging battle intent within him, and as a result, each one of his moves had been attacks with his life on the line. Of course, Long Chen wasn't an idiot. He cherished his life more than anyone. There were far too many things he had to protect. So while he might not have been afraid while fighting, the effect of the lingering fear afterward was still very strong. After all, he had exchanged thousands of blows with his stronger duplicate, and each one of those moves had been a brush past the Grim Reaper's shoulder. Anyone without a steady will as strong as his would have cracked under that pressure. His body stopped trembling and he walked over to the door. Inside should be the ultimate reward of this trial. He didn't know whether that would be able to let him regrow his spirit root, spirit blood, and spirit bone, but if it could. Thinking of that, Long Chen's heartbeat quickened. Passing through the door, he entered a square room 30 meters wide. Next to the wall, there was a platform with a jade bottle on it. The jade bottle was only a foot tall. It was covered in lines that should be a kind of rune. It seemed it had to be an exceedingly high-grade spatial storage item. There was a jade stopper on top of it. Long Chen snuck his spiritual strength through the stopper and into the bottle. "Fuck, what bastard stole my treasure?" he roared furiously. The jade bottle had a 30-meter space inside it, but it was completely empty. He couldn't stop his fury. After fighting to the brink of death, he hadn't obtained anything. He was about to go crazy. He crushed the bottle into smithereens. Cough, young people shouldn't be so easily angered. Suddenly, an ephemeral voice rang out in Long Chen's ears. He was startled, and flying rainbow instantly entered his hand. His spiritual strength spread, but he didn't notice any oddities. "Who are you?" shouted Long Chen. "I didn't expect someone to actually manage to get here after all these years. Young fellow, you're not bad." That voice once more rang out, but Long Chen couldn't tell where it was coming from, or even whether it was male or female. "Reveal yourself." He didn't know whether this person was a friend or foe, so he had to be cautious. This ending was a bit strange, and he didn't dare to be careless. Suddenly, the wall in front of him collapsed, causing him to jump. He hastily retreated, but he found that the collapsed wall merely revealed another room. That room also had a platform in it, and there was a bronze bell a foot tall on it. "Little fellow, I've revealed myself. Are you still not going to come over and pay your respects to this lord?" The bell suddenly spoke. Its voice sounded ancient and venerable. Long Chen was naturally startled. He looked around and saw that there really was nothing out of the ordinary before walking over. Once he was closer, he saw that the bell was badly damaged. It was covered in cracks and also missing a piece as if someone had smashed it with a hammer. "Brat, what's with that look? Are you looking down on this lord?" raged the bell. Long Chen suddenly thought of something and asked, "Did you steal the heaven-earth spirit source?" Cough, Don't say that I stole it. I just borrowed it. Yes, I drank it, said the bell awkwardly. You goddamn bastard, the treasure I risked my life for was actually drunk by you? Long Chen immediately flew into a rage. He took out a hammer and smashed it onto the bell. Boom. As a result, that middle-grade enchanted hammer, whose head was as big as a table, instantly exploded upon striking the bell. As for Long Chen, he was sent flying by a powerful chi wave and slammed into a wall. He almost coughed up blood. You dare to strike this lord? You must be tired of life. Raged the bell. Fuck off. You stole what's mine and you still think you're justified. Long Chen was even more enraged. The heaven-earth spirit source had been stolen. He now took out a saber and directly used Split the Heavens. When his saber chi struck the bell, a faint layer of light appeared on it. His saber image was blown apart. Brat, if you continue to be rude, I'll have to teach you a lesson, warned the bell. Rude? You're the damn thief, you shameless old thing. Cursed Long Chen. That heaven-earth spirit source had been extremely important to him, but now, all his previous hopes vanished into thin air. He felt like he was about to go crazy. Cough, that does seem to be my mistake. But how was I supposed to know that someone would come here after all these years? The bell felt a bit guilty. Cough up all that heaven-earth spirit source you drank. Long Chen directly took out a barrel and placed it in front of the bell. Are you planning on drinking my piss? Said the bell icily. You bitch. Now that it had said this, then even if it did hand over the heaven-earth spirit source, would he dare to drink it? He directly smashed the barrel onto the bell, and the barrel instantly exploded. That's enough. If we didn't come from the same place, I'd have long since put you in your place. Do you believe me when I say that if I release the slightest bit of my divine might, you'll be crushed in body and soul? Its reply was another barrel. Long Chen cursed, Do you think I'm an idiot? Those runic chains have bound you completely. Do you want to try crushing me? You can see those divine chains? The bell's tone was a bit shocked. Long Chen was so furious that he couldn't be bothered to reply. The heaven-earth spirit source was gone now. His hope to regain what he had lost popped like a bubble. There was nothing more to say. With the bell in its broken-down state, it was clear it had taken the heaven-earth spirit source to recover. It wouldn't have left any for him. Although he couldn't see them, his sharp perception allowed him to sense invisible chains in the air that tightly bound the bell. It was a prisoner, so Long Chen wasn't afraid of it. Little fellow, I might have stolen your heaven-earth spirit source, but I can make it up to you. Don't worry, since we come from the same place, I wouldn't trick you, said the bell. Its words caused Long Chen to be a bit flabbergasted. The same place. Didn't I say that we come from the same hometown? You also came from the eastern wasteland, correct? Said the bell. Long Chen was startled, never having expected this bronze bell to know this. But he didn't say anything. He could trust it just based on this. This trial had been extremely strange and ruthless. Those 108 pillars had been able to peer through all his battle skills and magical arts, and perhaps they had even been able to rifle through his memories. Otherwise, Blood Drinker wouldn't have appeared. So while Long Chen was surprised, he couldn't reveal that, nor did he say anything. This bell was particularly strange. It was already in such a broken state, and it was bound by countless divine chains, but enchanted items would instantly explode upon coming into contact with it. Hee, brat, you're very interesting. Sometimes you're as impetuous as an idiot, sometimes you're crafty like a fox. What a marvel, laughed the bell. What's your goal? Long Chen didn't like beating about the bush. Bring me out of this place. Are you joking? An existence as strong as you requires me to bring you out? Snorted Long Chen. I'm not joking. In truth, we have quite the destiny between us. I've been locked in here for too long. Those bastards extracted my core energy to maintain their trials, and now I've already reached my breaking point. If you don't bring me out, then it won't be long before I completely disappear from this world. As an item spirit, my core energy is my life energy. I hope you can help me. I can give you a satisfactory repayment, said the bell solemnly. How do I know you won't kill me once I save you? To tell you the truth, this is already the third time I've run into such a scenario. The last two were played to death by me, and I also gained quite a bit of profit. But I sense something dangerous about you, and my guess is that I won't be able to obtain anything good from your body. Long Chen shook his head frankly. Benefits? For now, I wouldn't be able to give you anything. But once I return to the Martial Heaven continent, I'll definitely give you an immense reward. And how am I supposed to believe you? Asked Long Chen. He couldn't sense any fluctuations from the bell, but his intuition said that this bell's origin was beyond imagination, or it wouldn't be locked in here. If it was an evil weapon, then wouldn't he be doomed? So of course he was still hesitant. Is the name of the Eastern Wasteland Bell enough to win your trust? The bell was silent for a long while before suddenly speaking. Long Chen cried out in shock. The Eastern Wasteland Bell? Wasn't that a divine item from the era of legends? The rumor was that the Eastern Wasteland Bell had been the protective divine item of the Eastern Wasteland, and it had controlled all the Eastern Wasteland's karmic luck. There were myths and legends that said the Martial Heaven continent had once been 5 blocks, but it wasn't like it was currently. Those 5 regions had actually been led by the Eastern Wasteland. Unlike now, it had been the Eastern Wasteland that had been the strongest. The legend was that the other regions also had divine items controlling their karmic luck. But the Eastern Wasteland Bell had been the strongest, the leader of the 5 divine items, which had allowed the Eastern Wasteland to dominate the 5 regions. But legends were legends. There were few people that believed in them. They were just imaginary things seniors liked to tell children. So hearing the name of the Eastern Wasteland Bell today, that name was like a hammer striking Long Chen's heart. Looking at this foot-tall bell that was covered in cracks and looked like it might shatter at any moment, Long Chen truly found it difficult to associate it with that legendary divine item. But for some unknown reason, Long Chen trusted it. That was the intuition that stemmed from the 9-star Hegemon body art. That intuition had never misled him. What should I do to help you? Asked Long Chen. You trust me? The bell was a bit surprised. Yes. Thank you. That'll save me a great deal of trouble. If you asked me too much, it would be hard on me. There are many things that I can't say, said the Eastern Wasteland Bell. Since I've chosen to trust you, I won't be so fussy about it. Helping Senior is helping myself. I hope that when I one day fall into danger, Senior can help. Long Chen smiled. Haha, that's a good temperament. Don't worry, I don't like owing people. Come, first I'll teach you how to break these chains. Long Chen returned to the room. He slashed Flying Rainbow directly through the ground, creating a large crack. Gently opening the crack, he saw an underground room in which countless formation lines were continuously moving like snakes. This was the core of this trial region. It was also the crux of the entire grand formation that controlled the operation of the trial region. It was constantly drawing out the Eastern Wasteland Bell's energy to maintain the trials. According to reason, the Eastern Wasteland Bell should have long since run out of energy and shattered. But then it said that at a certain time, the number of trial takers had dropped precipitously, and so it had taken less of its energy. It slowly found a way to absorb the energy within this room's treasures and other rewards so it could last longer. Long Chen knew that the Eastern Wasteland Bell was talking about the destruction of the immemorial path. Only the Shao tribe's disciples had later occasionally gone to the lower-level trials to test their luck, which was the only reason it had managed to endure. Obviously, the Eastern Wasteland Bell still didn't know what had happened to the immemorial path. When asked about how long it had been, it merely said that it had been chained here for too long to calculate. The node is where those 9 marks converge. Destroy it and the entire formation will be ruined. Remember to use Thunder Force, not a martial weapon. Otherwise, you'll be directly destroyed. The Eastern Wasteland Bell's voice rang out from above. Long Chen nodded. He saw there was a red dot where 9 large runes converged. That was his target. Taking a deep breath, he pointed his finger. A lightning arrow shot at the red dot. Suddenly, all the runes stopped moving. But in the next instant, they began to move many times faster than before. No, that wasn't enough power. The formation lines have gone chaotic. Get out! Shouted the Eastern Wasteland Bell. Even without its warning, Long Chen had already rushed off. At the same time, he brought out his divine ring and battle armor, summoning his greatest defense. That was because he was horrified to see all these formations' lines go chaotic as if they were boiling. The ground erupted. Long Chen was sent flying, vomiting blood. He smashed into a wall, and then the entire room suddenly collapsed. Long Chen's vision darkened as he became unable to see a thing. "Little fellow, are you all right?" Long Chen suddenly heard a voice in his head. How did you get in here?" Long Chen was startled. The Eastern Wasteland Bell had actually entered his mind sea, and he didn't have the slightest ability to resist. There's no need to be so surprised by such a small matter. Although I might be on the verge of death, such a minor thing is still simple. But I really didn't expect that your mind sea would be so vast. Even soul cultivators at your realm wouldn't have such soul energy. Oh, no wonder you wanted the heaven-earth spirit source and you were so mad once it was taken. So your spirit bone was excavated by someone. That really is vicious. What the? Even your spirit blood was extracted. What's going on? And your spirit root Long Chen felt the Eastern Wasteland Bell scanning his body. But when it reached his dantian, it let out a muffled groan. It seemed it had received a backlash. "Senior, are you all right?" he asked hastily. "I'm fine." After that curt reply, the Eastern Wasteland Bell descended into silence as if it was thinking. After a long moment, it said, "Long Chen, don't tell anyone about me." "Don't worry, Senior. I keep a tight lid over my mouth," said Long Chen. He really wasn't a gossip. "But I need to rest in your mindset. I won't be able to help you with anything temporarily. Take care." After saying that, the Eastern Wasteland Bell no longer said anything. It should have entered some kind of special state. Long Chen looked around. He saw that the formation had been broken. The earth, which had previously been harder than metal, had become soft after losing the support of the runes. He scurried up a path like a mouse. The immemorial path has actually been reduced to this state. It really is hard to believe. Long Chen had crossed 3 abysses when the Eastern Wasteland Bell's voice rang out, filled with pity. "Senior, didn't you need to rest?" asked Long Chen. "The rest I was talking about is resting in your mind sea. I can't help you handle enemies, but that doesn't stop me from communicating with you. I can see everything through your eyes." The Eastern Wasteland Bell sighed, thinking of the immemorial path's glory back then, and now seeing it in its ruined state. "I really can't help feeling emotional." "Senior, you saw the immemorial path in its golden age?" asked Long Chen. But after asking that, he felt his own question to be a bit stupid. The Eastern Wasteland Bell had been first sealed here, and only then had the immortal path crumbled. When I was locked here, the immemorial path was completely fine. But if the immemorial path hadn't been ruined, perhaps I would have long since ceased to exist, said the Eastern Wasteland Bell. "Senior, I want to ask you a few questions. If it touches on any sensitive topics, you don't need to answer," probed Long Chen. He had many suspicions. "Ask. I'll naturally answer if I can. But there are some things that someone on your level shouldn't know. It would bring you too much karma," said the Eastern Wasteland Bell. Long Chen nodded. Perhaps all of this involved extremely terrifying secrets. He was just at the Xiantian realm. That wasn't enough to come into contact with those secrets. "Senior, how did you end up like this?" asked Long Chen. "Betrayal." The Eastern Wasteland Bell's reply was extremely curt. "Betrayal? Could it be?" Long Chen's heart shook. He thought of something, but the Eastern Wasteland Bell clearly didn't want him to know too much, so he swallowed his words. "I want to know, with my aptitude, what level would I rank in the ancient times?" asked Long Chen. "Why would you want to know this?" "Because in the current era, within the same realm, I stand at the peak amongst my peers. But in the immemorial paths trials, I've found that it seems I'm still extremely lacking compared to those ancient heavenly geniuses," said Long Chen. "With your current power, you're actually at the peak? It seems the world really has changed," sighed the Eastern Wasteland Bell. Long Chen was speechless. Although he knew the Eastern Wasteland Belle was just sighing emotionally, this tone really was hurtful. Although he had been prepared for it, he still felt awkward. With your talent, even in my era, you would have counted as a peak genius. But regretfully, your spirit root, spirit blood, and spirit bone have all been removed. Your talent was ruined. With your current aptitude, in that era, you could just barely count as ordinary. You couldn't even reach the middle level. However, because of your cultivation technique, your combat power can count as having reached the middle level, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle. Senior, you know the origin of my cultivation technique? No. It's just a guess. Furthermore, your dantian has an extremely terrifying existence that doesn't let me probe it. So I don't dare to talk wildly about you, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle with a bit of fear. Long Chen was profoundly shaken. Even a legendary divine item was unable to probe the primal chaos bead. Then just what was the primal chaos bead? For even the Eastern Wasteland Belle to describe it as extremely terrifying. Long Chen had an urge to ask about the 9-star hegemon body art, but the Eastern Wasteland Belle was clearly avoiding that topic. In truth, in all my countless years, you're the strongest person I've ever seen. Perhaps you can create a miracle, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle suddenly. Senior, didn't you say my aptitude only counts as ordinary? Aptitude doesn't represent everything. All experts become experts because they are forced. That's what it means when people say that time makes the man. Heroes are forced to appear by the era. The first thing experts need to know is why they have to get stronger. If they get weak, they won't just lose their lives, they'll also lose everything they hold dear. I have noticed you since you entered the trial. On the 8th level, despite being forced to the brink, you didn't cower or feel terror. I saw that confidence inside you that said that you would definitely win. That confidence existed because you knew you couldn't lose, because if you lost, you would lose everything. Furthermore, on the last level, you still chose to abandon your advantage against a stronger version of yourself. You chose to fight with your life on the line. Although that was very stupid, experts must possess the ability to do such stupid things. While I was sealed, I saw far too many people die beneath their own blades. This trial is just a death trap. The person who made this trial was incredibly vicious. The path she walked on was one of countless bones. That's why she called this trial the undefeatable trial. It's not because the trial is undefeatable, but because the only way a person can pass is if they maintain an undefeatable heart even facing a stronger version of themselves. Long Chen, that heart of yours is the staunchest I've ever seen. I trust that you've experienced countless trials that tempered that will. You don't need to care about aptitude. The cycle of the heavenly Daos comes and goes. A loss might be a gain might be a loss. Don't get so attached to such things, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle. A loss might be a gain might be a loss? Was it referring to how he had lost his spirit root, spirit blood, and spirit bone, which allowed him to gain the 9-star hegemon body art? If he hadn't lost his spirit root, thus destroying his dantian, he wouldn't have been able to cultivate the 9-star hegemon body art. Was this predestined? The Eastern Wasteland Belle definitely knew about some things, but it refused to say it directly. Was that self-protection, or to protect him? Many thanks for the reminder, Senior, said Long Chen. Not bad. To have such comprehension skills is truly praiseworthy. It's no wonder. The Eastern Wasteland Belle swallowed the rest of its words. I'd like to ask Senior to help me with something. Long Chen looked at Little Snow in his spiritual space. Little Snow was sleeping and didn't know about his conversation with the Eastern Wasteland Belle. It's useless. It has already obtained an opportunity to mutate and break through its proper shackles. But opportunities come to an end eventually, and its opportunities have run out. There's no way it can continue to advance. The Eastern Wasteland Belle didn't even need Long Chen to explain. Hearing this, Long Chen's heart shook. Little Snow had always been a worry to Long Chen's heart. After reaching the Xiantian realm, Little Snow had reached his limit and couldn't advance any further. Whether it was the heavenly Tao fruits, the divine mortal molting elixir, or the countless other methods he had tried, they had all been useless to Little Snow. Now even the eastern wasteland belle said little Snow couldn't advance anymore. That was conclusive. Long Chen was growing stronger and stronger, so little Snow was being left further and further behind. Their days of fighting side by side were gone. Long Chen didn't particularly care about the power little Snow could offer him, but he could sense that ever since little Snow had stopped advancing, he had become depressed. He was no longer excited about most things. Each day, he would just stay in his spiritual space, refusing to come out. Long Chen felt extremely helpless. If I was at my peak, perhaps I would have been able to change a portion of heaven and earth's laws, breaking their shackles for it. But at most, it would only be able to advance to the 9th rank. To allow it to continue advancing past that would require truly heaven-defying abilities, continued the Eastern Wasteland Belle. What? As long as you can fully recover, you can help little Snow. Long Chen was delighted to hear this. For me to fully recover is incredibly difficult. Furthermore, by that time, even if it can advance to the 9th rank, you'll have reached higher realms. It wouldn't have any meaning, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle. That's fine. If you need any help, just ask. As long as I can accomplish it, I definitely won't say a word of objection, said Long Chen. It's just an ordinary house pet. Is it worth it for you to act like this? The Eastern Wasteland Belle was a bit puzzled. Little Snow isn't my house pet. He grew up with me from infancy. Moreover, he suffered countless hardships and almost lost his life several times for me. He is my companion. Although I'm strong enough on my own, I hope he can also grow stronger and continue fighting alongside me, said Long Chen. You really are an emotional fool. You actually feel such sentiments toward a magical beast? Fine, I promise, once my power fully recovers, I will help you with this, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle helplessly. Many thanks, Senior. Don't thank me yet. My body has been smashed and scattered, it is no longer complete. To recover is not easy. We can just take things step by step. Let's look around the immemorial path to see if we can find the things we need. All right. Long Chen quickly agreed. No matter what, as long as the Eastern Wasteland Belle was present, the problem with little Snow would be solved sooner or later. After all, it was a legendary existence. It wouldn't dupe him regarding such a thing. Senior, where should we go? My injuries are too heavy and I can't use divine sense to search. It's a good thing your spiritual strength is strong enough to provide me with a slight nourishing effect. At the very least, my injuries won't worsen. You can walk around as you please. Some things are best left to fate. Senior, if my spiritual strength has a nourishing effect on you, why don't you absorb it? Then couldn't you rapidly recover? Foolish talk. How could it be so simple? Although your spiritual strength is strong, it's like a cup of water on a burning house. Furthermore, if I absorbed your spiritual strength, your soul would forever be missing a portion. Even if you agreed, the existence within you wouldn't. Don't worry, when you kill your enemies, I'll absorb their spiritual strength to recover, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle. Although it was reprimanding him, its tone had clearly grown a bit more amiable. In all its countless years, this was its first time seeing someone like Long Chen who had survived countless trials and hardships, and yet still maintained such a pure heart even once he had cultivated to the Xiantian realm. This trust and unstinting companionship was something the Eastern Wasteland Belle found very likable. Boom. Suddenly, the ground shook slightly. Long Chen hastily looked in one direction. He saw a cloud of dust coming from a distant mountain range. That seemed to be the result of an intense battle. He quickly flashed into motion. Thunder Force covered him as he used the lightning body blink in that direction. After going over a mountain, he saw over 10 people fighting an enormous magical beast. When he saw one of them, he became incredibly excited. Fuck, this time I've caught you. There were over 10 experts fighting against an armored lizard. That armored lizard was a mile long and covered in powerful scales. Its huge tail was like a whip that crumbled mountains when it struck. It was actually extremely amazing, and it was forcing those 10+ experts to miserably retreat. The intense battle had already changed the terrain in the mountain range. Those people were all experts amongst experts. All of them were at least rank 2 celestials, and there were even 3 rank 3 celestials. Amongst them was Long Chen's old friend, Xueyu. Xueyu was surrounded by 3 different runes that released a torrential aura. On his own, Xueyu was blocking the majority of the armored lizard's attacks. The other 2 rank 3 celestials were in charge of restricting it at the sides, while the rank 2 celestials could only occasionally launch attacks when they had an opening. But their attacks were clearly unable to cause much damage to the armored lizard. "What? Do you recognize them?" asked the Eastern Wasteland Belle. "They're my mortal enemies." Long Chen nodded. He rapidly thought up a plan. "Senior, are you capable of concealing my aura? Something as minor as that is simple. But are you planning on sneak attacking him once I conceal your aura? Let me warn you, that long-haired fellow is not so simple. He's an innate rank 3 celestial, and he's already begun condensing his 4th heavenly Dao rune. His odds of one day becoming a rank 4 celestial are practically 100%. Your chances of successfully sneak attacking him are very low." "It's too risky," warned the Eastern Wasteland Belle. Long Chen smiled. "That's fine. It's not my first time coming into contact with him. That last battle was truly sullen. But this time, I'll have a proper battle with him. Last time, he acted like such a poser. Now it's time for me to get my revenge." Thinking of how Xueyu had acted as if he was a supreme overlord, as if he could crush him with a wave of his hand, Long Chen was extremely irritated. He had his own pride. Such humiliation and contempt were something that infuriated Long Chen, but back then he hadn't had the qualifications to be infuriated. However, today would be different. "So are you planning on sneak attacking him?" asked the Eastern Wasteland Belle. "No, he doesn't have the qualifications to make me sneak attack him. I want to kill him with my true strength. Furthermore, I'm not very good at assassinations. As soon as I attack, I won't be able to conceal my killing intent and I'll be sensed. Failing an assassination attempt is too embarrassing, so I'd prefer to fight him head-on. I'll have more confidence that way." "Then why have me conceal your aura? I have something more important that I want to do. At that time, you just have to work together with me." Long Chen laughed mischievously, a crafty light shining in his eyes. Boom! Xueyu's black sword slashed onto the armored lizard's head. That immense force sent its head slamming into the ground, causing the ground to sink once more. "Careful!" Xueyu suddenly shouted. With its head smashed into the ground, the armored lizard's huge tail wildly swung without any pattern. As a result, one rank 2 celestial didn't dodge in time and was struck by the tail. A terrifying force directly blew him into a bloody mist. Long Chen couldn't help being startled. Just what level was this armored lizard? It seemed it wasn't lacking compared to Meng Qi's Red-Eye's Sacred Blood Phoenix. What he didn't know was that this armored lizard was actually a mutated magical beast. Its original bloodline was substandard, but after mutating, its combat power had become terrifying. It could be ranked as an overlord amongst rank 7 magical beasts. With its mutated runes on its scales, even Xueyu's sword was unable to break through its defenses, and Xueyu's sword was a treasure item. It was precisely because it was so powerful that Xueyu had been delighted to find it. He had been willing to spend a great deal of time baiting it out of its lair so he could capture it as his house pet. In truth, while the armored lizard was powerful, it had one fatal weak point. There was a white scale between its eyes. That scale was similar to a dragon's reverse scale. That scale was its only weak point. If they concentrated their attacks on it, then killing it wouldn't be very difficult. After all, it was a magical beast with an impure bloodline. Even if it had mutated, it hadn't been able to completely erase its innate weak point. But that wasn't something bad to Xueyu. When he fought against others, he would stand at that scale to protect it. Then there would be no weak points. With the two of them combined, they would be like tigers with wings. Their power would reach a whole new level. So Xueyu intentionally avoided that fatal spot. He wanted to use power to subdue it and then place a slave mark. If he used a curse to weaken it, then even once he forcibly placed the slave mark, it wouldn't be convinced of his power. Then it would continuously try to fight back. If he had to stop it from fighting him during a battle, capturing it would have no meaning. However, if he used power to subdue it before making it his house pet, such a house pet would be afraid, and the chances of it fighting back were lower. After that, by acting good to the magical beast for a while, lowering its guard, they could properly fight together. Shui Yu's runes surged as he fought. The others had surrounded it, not letting it escape. If it fled to its lair, all their previous efforts would be wasted. Seeing Shui Yu's power, Long Chen was startled. It seemed he was even stronger than when he had fought the hidden ground gold spider king. Currently, he hadn't even released his full power, but each of his attacks was incredible. Long Chen suddenly thought of the Eastern Wasteland Bell's words, as well as how Shui Yu had tried to become a rank 4 celestial in the trial caves. The Eastern Wasteland Bell had said that Shui Yu was already in the process of becoming a rank 4 celestial. Although he was still just in that process, his power was already so high. Once he succeeded, wouldn't he be unrivaled? They fought for over 2 hours. The armored lizard was clearly unable to defeat Shui Yu. That was because its strongest aspect was its defense, and it didn't have any long-range attacks. Its huge body had become its weakness now, as it was unable to reach Shui Yu. To it, Shui Yu was too small and fast of a target. It tried to flee several times, but the others had tightly surrounded it and refused to allow it to pass. As a result, after all this time, it had exhausted all of its energy. Without any energy to struggle, it lay on the ground. Although it possessed a fierce and savage temperament, it knew it was done for today. Haha, there's no need to be afraid. I won't kill you. In the future, you'll buy this lord's house pet. Laughed Shui Yu excitedly. After hours of fighting, after striking it with so many attacks from his black sword, he saw that there was very little damage to its scales. There wasn't even any blood. Its defense was truly unrivaled. What he needed was a house pet with unrivaled defense. His Yama King blood curse took time to use, and it was easy to interrupt. But with the armored lizard protecting him, who could interrupt him? At that time, he would be able to use that curse as he pleased. Long Chen suddenly asked the Eastern Wasteland Bell, "Senior, what does this lord mean? Is that a very badass appellation?" "Cough, this question of yours is a bit awkward," coughed the Eastern Wasteland Bell. It had also once called itself this lord in front of Long Chen. At that time, thinking of its own status, the Eastern Wasteland Bell was clearly much higher than Long Chen. After all, an existence like it was something Long Chen had to look up to. So it had naturally called itself this lord. But who would have thought that Long Chen possessed such an incredibly terrifying existence within him? So it no longer called itself this lord. Furthermore, it had found that in front of Long Chen, it had no qualifications to be arrogant. So now that Long Chen asked this, it immediately became embarrassed. He has begun placing the slave mark. "Senior, help me conceal my aura. I want to give my old friend a pleasant surprise." After saying that, Long Chen began stealthily creeping his way closer. The armored lizard was huge, and so it blocked the other's line of sight. When the slave mark was being placed, the armored lizard once more began struggling, but it had already exhausted all its energy. And under everyone's combined suppression, the slave mark smoothly entered. Haha, from today onwards, I, Shui Yu, will dominate the immemorial path. Who could possibly contend against me? Shui Yu excitedly roared after placing the slave mark. Congratulations, Lord Shui Yu, on obtaining an unrivaled steed. The people around him immediately respectfully flattered him. Haha, Devil Empress Yuan, you've suppressed me for so long. Today, I'll be turning the tables. Is the corrupt path something that can be led by a woman like you? Sneered Shui. As soon as he mentioned the Devil Empress Yuan, the others shivered in fear. They were clearly terrified of that Devil Empress. You don't need to be afraid. Lung Yuan is claimed to be number 1 in close-range combat, but that just happens to be my weakness. That's the only reason she suppressed me. But now that I have the armored lizard, as long as she can't break its defenses for a moment, I'll be able to force her to her death, said Shui Yu confidently. That's true. This armored lizard's defense can truly be described as unrivaled. Even your treasure item was unable to break its defenses, said a rank 2 celestial. If I had used my full strength to activate the treasure item, then this armored lizard would only have been able to block 3 of my attacks. But that's already enough. As long as it can block a single attack, I'll have achieved my goal. In terms of defense, this mutated magical beast is definitely number 1 amongst 7th rank magical beasts, claimed Shuiyu arrogantly. Is that so? I don't really believe that. Let me try it. A lazy voice rang out from the top of the armored lizard's head. Seeing the owner of that voice, Shuiyu's expression completely changed. Other than just the common word for I, in Chinese, you can also call yourself different things to express different things. Here, this lord is an arrogant and supreme way of referring to oneself. It is used by multiple characters. For example, when Shui Wuhan first appeared, she also called herself at the beginning, but she doesn't use it with Long Chen. Another common appellation in this novel is, which can mean your daddy. It is also an arrogant way to call oneself, but unlike, it is much less dignified. So, is something a respected sect leader would use, while is what a boss of a gang would use. Is what Long Chen calls himself when he's being a poser, and the Dragonblood warriors may also use it depending on the time, and so did the person from the heaven-splitting divine sect. In this case, the Eastern Wasteland Bell referred to itself as when it first met Long Chen, but then it switched to, which might be translated as this old man. I generally won't actually translate these appellations as this lord or your daddy unless they're actually relevant in terms of wordplay like here. Instead, I normally just use tone or descriptors to get the meaning across. At some unknown point, Long Chen had appeared on top of the armored lizard's head. He winked at Shuiyu while leaning on an unremarkable sword. Long Chen. Seeing Long Chen, especially that evil smile on his face, an extremely bad feeling arose in Shuiyu's heart. After hearing you brag about it so much and for so long, I don't even know if you're telling the truth or not anymore, so let me test it. Long Chen smiled, and just like that, he stabbed his sword at the armored lizard. The place he was standing on was precisely its fatal weak point. Furthermore, the armored lizard had just had a slave mark placed on it. Its soul was damaged, and it was in a semi-conscious state. It wasn't able to sense the danger. Bastard, don't dash. Stop. Stay your hand. The corrupt experts immediately panicked. They all recognized Long Chen, so seeing him here, his goal was all too obvious. Don't stop? Of course, there's no way to stop now, laughed Long Chen. Flying Rainbow suddenly blossomed with light. It was like a blazing sun, and an incredibly sharp aura erupted as it directly pierced the armored lizard's head. Long Chen had activated Flying Rainbow's sword light. Long Chen was now capable of connecting to Flying Rainbow's item spirit, but because its spirit had been in slumber for so long, he was only able to release a portion of its power. However, that was enough. This attack didn't just pierce the armored lizard's head, but it also directly shattered its crystal core. Its body twitched and then never moved again. Shuiyu and the others were simply stunned for a moment. They had worked so hard for quite a few days to draw it here. They had just subdued it when it was killed. Cough, I'm so sorry, I actually ended up killing it. But you can't blame it on me. Previously, you bragged about it so much that I thought it was super amazing, but as a result, Long Chen shrugged and innocently said, well, if it's dead, it's dead. Let's not quibble about it so much. Try to restrain your grief. I wouldn't want you to cry over this corpse, so I'll just take it for you. Well, I still have some stuff to do, so I won't accompany you any longer. Long Chen directly took the armored lizard's corpse. A 7th rank magical beast's corpse was a treasure for him. You want to run? Leave your life behind first. The veins on Shuiyu's forehead were about to explode, and his eyes were about to spit flames. But he wasn't even able to speak right now. It was the others who felt that something was off and surrounded Long Chen. Looking at Shuiyu's expression, Long Chen couldn't help laughing. That expression of his looked like he had just drunk a jug of excrement. Even his face was turning purple. His body was quivering. To turn the acclaimed corrupt king who dominated countless geniuses into this state, even Long Chen had to admire his own abilities. He really was talented. You can still laugh. I'll tear you to pieces. roared Shui. His hair was standing on end, and the killing intent in his eyes was as sharp as a blade. His hatred had reached a kind of peak. He had an urge to bite Long Chen to death. Countless black runes lit up on his sword, and black chi erupted as he charged at Long Chen. Boom! The ground was split open where Shui Yu's sword landed. Endless dust erupted into the air. However, Long Chen's figure vanished. Was he killed in one blow? The corrupt experts were startled. Shui Yu's sword had struck so quickly without accumulating the slightest energy, but it was still immensely powerful. That was the terror of Shui Yu. Suddenly, muffled bangs rang out. They were horrified. Careful! A ghost-like figure dashed amongst their midst, his sword flowing like water. Each strike represented another expert that was blown to bits. "Everyone, retreat!" shouted Shui Yu, appalled by Long Chen's speed. He was so fast that even Shui Yu couldn't clearly see his figure. His black sword suddenly stabbed toward Long Chen. "Don't be so anxious. I'll clean up these hindrances before having a proper battle with you." Long Chen's figure once more disappeared. Each strike of his sword was as fast as lightning. With his lightning body blink, there was no one who could resist. In just a few blinks of an eye, other than rank 3 celestials, the rest had all been killed. Long Chen was just too fast. By the time they saw him appear beside them, they had already been struck by his sword. Long Chen's power flowed within his sword, and when it entered their bodies, it was like explosives detonating. Their bodies instantly exploded, and there was no chance to use the Heavenly Tao recovery. Bastard die! Shui Yu was completely infuriated. These were the new subordinates he had just gathered. His old subordinates had been mostly killed by the hidden ground gold spider king. Now his new subordinates that were loyal and powerful were once more killed because of Long Chen. His fury peaked. But with the lightning body blink, Long Chen's afterimages filled the air. He was too fast, and no one was able to track him. Suddenly, sword light flashed. A rank 3 celestial, despite being on his highest guard, still had his head severed. He barely had a chance to scream before a lightning arrow caused his head to explode. Even his soul didn't have a chance to flee. One rank 3 celestial was now dead. The other one immediately panicked. He felt endless killing intent enveloping him. It was like the gaze of the Grim Reaper had finally landed on him. No matter how he tried, no matter how hard he struggled, he wouldn't be able to escape. His death was fated now. Lord Corrupt King, save Dash. In his terror, that rank 3 celestial actually did an extremely stupid thing. He actually gave up his defense and started running toward Shui Yu. But that created an opening, and Long Chen pounced on it. He was killed in one blow. The world returned to calm. Those afterimages disappeared to be replaced by Long Chen calmly standing there, his sword pointed toward the ground. A drop of blood fell from his sword. That sound was very light, but it represented that another rank 3 celestial's life had ended. Long Chen swung his sword up. He almost slashed his own sword onto his shoulder by habit. But his sword was double-edged, and resting it on his shoulder was extremely stupid. Even if he laid it on the flat side, it would still feel strange. It would look similar to a suicide posture. Long Chen was a bit unused to this kind of feeling. "Shui Yu, we weren't able to have a true battle at the trial caves last time. But now you can bring out your full power. Let me see just how much ability you have. Let's see if it'll be like you said back then, that even if I was at full power, I still wouldn't be able to last 10 exchanges with you." Long Chen pointed his sword at Shui Yu. That was what Shui Yu had said back in the trial caves. Long Chen still hadn't forgotten his tone and expression. He returned his words back at him perfectly. "Divine Ring, for Star Battle Armor." The void trembled. The ground split apart as Long Chen's aura erupted, causing heaven and earth to change color. "As I thought, it's that. Long Chen's just an ordinary person. Why would he be chosen by a legendary existence? Just what happened to this world? Did that matter back then really happen?" The Eastern Wasteland Bell wondered to itself as it watched everything from Long Chen's mind see. The Enlightenment Palace star poured forth a raging power, and Long Chen's aura spiked to an unprecedented level. Shui Yu's expression suddenly changed. He hadn't expected Long Chen to be so powerful. With a furious roar, an immense image appeared behind him. That image was of a fiend's face. Blood devil possession. That fiendish face merged with Shui Yu's body. His long hair began to float as his aura also erupted. It was like a devil king had been born. Split the heavens too. Long Chen immediately unleashed one of his ultimate moves. Facing Shui Yu, he didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless. He had to go all out. Sword light pierced the sky and then mercilessly slashed down. Shui Yu was instantly locked by a terrifying aura. His expression was grave as he raised his own sword. Holding it with both hands, his third eye suddenly opened. A ray of black light shot into the sword. His sword seemed to come alive. A pillar of black light soared and an incredibly sinister aura erupted. It was like a sword that had come from hell. Devil void breaking slash. Black and white sword lights slammed into each other. The ground rapidly sank as countless cracks spread into the distance. Qi waves erupted, shaking the land within 1,000 miles. Shui Yu and Long Chen were both sent flying. But Shui Yu suddenly felt his hair stand on end as a sensation of death enveloped him. Without even thinking about it, he dodged to the side. A cold sword touched his shoulder. Although the tip only broke the skin, an explosive force shattered his shoulder. His arm almost went flying as blood erupted. Long Chen's original goal hadn't been to kill Shui Yu with his first move, but to rely on the shockwaves from the first move to launch a sudden attack with the lightning body blink. However, Shui Yu was a true expert and he had sensed it. This attack only gave him an injury that couldn't count as particularly heavy. Devil Eye exterminates the world. Shui Yu's third eye suddenly opened again, and a ray of light shot at Long Chen. The two of them were too close. Although Long Chen had known that Shui Yu could release attacks with his third eye, this attack had come too suddenly. There was no time for him to dodge. Thunder force circulated as Long Chen's fist smashed into that ray of light. The light shattered, but Long Chen's hand was also turned into meat pulp. What power? Long Chen was shocked. He had already protected himself with his thunder force, but this attack had still destroyed his hand. It had to be known that his current power was much greater than before. The Enlightenment Palace star had reached the 8th star transformation, and his physical body had been greatly strengthened, to the point that it was several times stronger than before. But he was still injured. However, this kind of injury was instantly healed with the primal chaos bead. He sheathed his sword behind his back and rapidly formed hand seals. Double dragon destruction. A lightning and flame dragon shot out, roaring furiously. Shui Yu's expression changed. This attack's power was something he had personally experienced. Even back then, it had caused him a great deal of trouble. Now Long Chen was using it at full power, and its power caused his scalp to turn numb. Shui Yu suddenly took out a bone. That bone was glossy like jade, but it was covered in lines. It released an evil air. It looked to be a human skull. As soon as it left Shui Yu's hand, it began to grow, becoming hundreds of meters tall. Boom! The two dragons crashed into the skull. The skull instantly shattered. Following that, endless devil qi transformed into a black monster that fought against them. Long Chen was startled. This skull had actually been sealing a soul that was capable of fighting. But Long Chen was still confident. That soul might be extremely powerful, but it was suppressed by Lei Long and Hua Long. There was no danger to them. As long as they were given enough time, they would be able to defeat it. In truth, Shui Yu was quite distressed. That skull was something he had obtained from an ancient devil skeleton. Inside had been the slightest discarnate soul. Shui Yu had constantly fed living people's souls to it for it to become stronger. As long as it was given enough spiritual strength, it would have eventually become an exceedingly terrifying existence. But nourishing such a soul was extremely dangerous. He definitely couldn't allow it to become stronger than himself, or there was a danger of it taking over his body. So once that soul grew close enough to his own power, he would stop feeding it. Once he broke through to see expansion, he would have continued feeding its souls and raising its power. But the double dragon destruction Long Chen had released wasn't a battle skill. He was letting those two existences within him freely attack. Even if he could block their first attack, they would constantly entangle him, and with Long Chen's ghost-like movement art, his life would be in danger. So despite knowing that it would be restricted, Xueyu had still sacrificed this soul to hold back Lei Long and Hualong. It was his only choice, or he would definitely be defeated today. The thing that startled both Long Chen and Xueyu was that the soul had only appeared for a moment before a strange energy caused it to explode. Then it just disappeared. What just happened? Xueyu was appalled, filled with disbelief. As for Long Chen, just as he was stunned, the Eastern Wasteland Bell's voice rang out in his mind. Hee, that was not bad. It was quite nourishing, even if it was so little. The Eastern Wasteland Bell possessed its own item spirit. It could be considered a spiritual existence, and after this many years, it had reached its limit. Having run out of energy, it had been close to dissipating. The experts that Long Chen had previously killed had had their souls absorbed by it before they could dissipate. Those were treasures that could help it heal. However, compared to this soul beast, those souls had been nothing more than appetizers. This soul was the main course, and it would allow it to recover a bit of its power. Seeing his soul beast disappear, Xueyu was stunned. But Long Chen quickly recovered and he flashed into motion, his sword arriving right next to Xueyu. Xueyu hastily blocked. There was no time for him to bother about what had happened with the soul beast. But just as he blocked Long Chen's sword, Lei Long and Hualong also roared and attacked him. Xueyu chose to block Long Chen's sword. As a result, Lei Long and Hualong struck him, causing him to vomit blood and shoot back. He was like a meteorite, and he left a huge crater in the ground. Dust erupted. You want to run? Leave your life behind first. Long Chen snorted. He slashed his sword down. Sword light pierced the ground. Boom. A long gorge appeared in the ground. A miserable figure flew out, vomiting blood. The instant Xueyu had been sent crashing into the ground, he had used the earth to conceal the fact that he was preparing to flee. But with Long Chen's divine sense locked onto him, was it possible he would give him that chance? Furthermore, Long Chen knew that this fellow was extremely powerful. He wouldn't run just like this. In truth, he should be trying to gain distance to use some sort of secret art. Having seen through that, he ruined his plan with a slash of his sword. Long Chen chased after Xueyu. Lei Long and Hualong were rumbling in the air, accompanying him in attacking Xueyu, causing him to appear extremely miserable. Corrupt Spirit Space Lock. Xueyu suddenly shouted and formed hand seals. That image of a fiend's face once more appeared, and Long Chen felt as if space had frozen. It was like he had been encased in an iceberg. Long Chen snorted and circulated the primal chaos bead. He unleashed the full power of his physical body. Cracks like ice shattering appeared in the air. The spatial strength confining Long Chen broke. Split the heavens. Long Chen didn't hesitate. Sword chi slashed forward. The split the heavens battle skill could be used with a sword or saber. Although he was a bit unused to using a sword, he had to admit that using a sword allowed him to unleash split the heavens faster. It was just that it didn't have enough power behind it. However, that was made up for with Flying Rainbow's sharpness. Its power was still incredible. Xueyu hadn't expected Long Chen to break free from his lock so easily. Before he could finish his new hand seals, Long Chen's attack had already arrived. He hastily broke off his hand seals and blocked with his sword. Xueyu once more vomited blood and flew back. He couldn't help groaning. This time, it had not been a light injury. You want to unleash a curse right in front of me? Long Chen sneered. From the moment Xueyu had charged underground and fled, Long Chen had guessed what he was thinking. The corrupt path's curses were extremely difficult to deal with. Last time, Long Chen had been weakened into a dog by a curse and almost lost his life. Did Xueyu think he wouldn't be on guard against it this time? As soon as Xueyu had used that spatial magical art, Long Chen had guessed he was trying to stall to activate a curse. So he hadn't hesitated. And as expected, this fellow had been in the midst of activating a curse. But it was interrupted midway, which definitely would have caused a backlash. This particular curse had a short activation time, so it definitely hadn't reached the level of the Yama King blood curse. But it still wouldn't be good to be struck by it. Long Chen couldn't help but feel lucky. It was no wonder that Shui Yu so desperately wanted that armored lizard. If he had the defense of the armored lizard, and he protected the weak point at its forehead, Shui Yu would be able to freely release curses from the armored lizard's back. This fellow was actually not skilled in close-range combat. Instead, he specialized in long-range curses. It was no wonder he was constantly trying to gain distance. Thinking of that, Long Chen knew that he definitely couldn't allow that to happen. Experiencing a curse once was enough. He activated the lightning body blink, chasing after Shui Yu. But Shui Yu's movement art was also extremely fast, as dozens of miles were traversed in an instant. However, in front of the lightning body blink, that speed wasn't enough. Long Chen still caught up. Shui Yu not only had to block Long Chen's sudden attacks, but he also had to block Lei Long and Hua Long. His black sword was dancing through the air as he miserably fled, occasionally coughing up blood. His strongest points were his magical arts and curses. Those two things required forming hand seals and drawing heaven and earth's energy. They also needed time to use. This was also why Long Chen hadn't used the Raging Flame Prison. Magical arts might be limitlessly powerful, but in a true battle, they didn't have much use, especially in a one-against-one. It was difficult to get a chance to use them. In a life-and-death battle, who would just stand there and watch you unleash your ultimate move? That kind of situation would only occur on the martial arenas of those large sections. Those incomparable geniuses might be able to use them then, but not in a battle. A true battle changed in the blink of an eye, and the slightest mistake could lead to a defeat. This kind of battle always relied on experience and smarts. In Long Chen's eyes, those competitions on martial arenas were no different than cockfighting. They were competing over who was more ornamental and whose moves looked more beautiful. To put it frankly, it was a competition of who was more of an idiot. Although he currently had the advantage, the slightest mistake could lead to him being struck by Shui Yu's curse. Then that would very likely lead to a complete reversal, and the one to die in the end would be him. So in a fight against experts like Shui Yu, you couldn't reveal the slightest opening. In the same way, Shui Yu also wouldn't reveal any openings to him. In this kind of battle, that kind of opening signified the end of the battle. While Shui Yu fled and fought, he had no choice but to admit that he wasn't Long Chen's match when it came to close-range fighting. He was searching for an opportunity as he fled. "This is your so-called unable to endure 10 exchanges?" sneered Long Chen as he forced Shui Yu to run. However, although he had taken the advantage, he was shocked by how strong Shui Yu was. Even in this kind of situation, he was unable to find an opening to take his life. Furthermore, he didn't dare to be greedy and force it. He had to take it steadily. In this kind of high-speed chase, if he tried to unleash one of his ultimate moves, it would create a gap between them. Either Shui Yu would get away, or he would unleash a curse. So Long Chen was also in a difficult situation. He had to continue chasing and attack Shui Yu, or once he opened up the distance, he would be the one in danger. Hearing Long Chen's sneer, Shui Yu's face became burning hot. Thinking of his big words, they were like a slap in his face now. "Bastard, you are courting death," roared Shui Yu. Long Chen was speechless to see that this idiot actually tossed out some vicious words before continuing to flee. Long Chen was chasing Shui Yu. He had lightning wings on his back, and there were lightning whirlpools in his body. His speed far surpassed Shui Yu, but Shui Yu refused to face him head-on. When Long Chen tried to use one of his powerful moves, Shui Yu would always use some sort of secret art to escape his lock. If he couldn't lock down his opponent, then the chances of failure were just too high. No matter how strong the technique, if it was unable to hit your opponent, then it was useless. The two of them were deadlocked, fighting as they traveled. Sword chi flew, mountains collapsed. It was an amazing and imposing sight. Shui Yu had tried activating his treasure item to run, but Long Chen didn't give him any chance to do so. Furthermore, Shui Yu was also unwilling to flee just like this. He was trying to find an opportunity to kill Long Chen. As a generation's genius, he definitely wouldn't allow himself to be defeated so easily. As the two of them fought, they startled countless people searching for treasures. The two of them were like shooting stars. Rumbling filled the air wherever they passed, and mountains split in front of them. Those people all felt their scalps turn numb upon seeing that. Who are those two? What level of battle is this? Heavens, isn't that the corrupt path's supreme expert, the corrupt King Shuiyu? Shuiyu, one of the corrupt path's top 2 experts, claimed to be unrivaled? The one who has never been beaten in the same realm? Are you telling stories? Never been beaten in the same realm? Then what is happening right here? It looks like Shuiyu's the one who's been beaten into a dog. He's covered in blood and running. That doesn't count as a loss? Damn, who is that person? When did our righteous path give birth to such a terrifying figure? Isn't that Long Chen? Heavens, it really is senior apprentice brother Long Chen. 2 righteous disciples let out a startled cry upon seeing Long Chen's face. They were disciples from the sects subordinate to the Xiantian Dao sect. Before entering, they had seen Long Chen. Back then, Long Chen had been quite low-key, perfectly content to let Shui Guanji and the other 4 heavenly geniuses hog the spotlight. But later, the remote heaven gang had provoked them, and even the feather races Yu Changhao and the Bloodkill Hall's Huang Junmo had pointed their spears at him. He had become the focus, so everyone who had been there now recognized him. However, the Eastern Wasteland's righteous path had 2 large entrances to the immemorial path. There were also quite a few unpopular smaller entrances. So not everyone recognized Long Chen. Those who recognized him had thought that Long Chen would be doomed after so many experts had singled him out as their targets. But now, Long Chen was incredibly imposing. His sword light was brilliant and powerful, even forcing the corrupt path's Shuiyu to flee so miserably. Their jaws almost fell to the ground at the sight of this. Brandishing his sword with his 2 dragons roaring around him, Long Chen's aura was like a furious dragon that couldn't be stopped. That, unrivaled, Shuiyu was forced to flee like a dog. Lord Shuiyu Guili has come to help. Suddenly, a man from the corrupt path appeared. He was extremely tall and sturdy. He held a spiked club that he smashed at Long Chen. An image of a giant appeared behind him. With each step he took, the ground quivered. A rank 3 celestial. The hidden spectators were all startled. Within that illusory giant, there were 3 different runes circulating. Once he joined hands with Shuiyu, would Long Chen be the one forced to run? Long Chen was also startled. Now it was troublesome. If it was at an ordinary time, he might not care about such a person. But this was a critical moment, and he could cause a big problem. The corrupt energy mountain splitting club. That corrupt expert raised his spiked club while he was still in the distance. The illusory giant behind also followed his actions, raising its own spiked club. Suddenly, their 2 bodies superimposed. An image of a huge club covered in runes whistled down. The spectators were all horrified. This was a rank 3 celestial's full-strength attack. Whoever touched it would die. But they saw that Long Chen didn't seem to have any intention of dodging. In truth, Long Chen also thought of dodging as he didn't want to waste his energy. But if he dodged the first move, that expert would have an opening to release a rain of unending attacks on him. That would be even more troublesome. Split the heavens too. Sword chi soared into the heavens. A domineering will erupted. In that instant, the world seemed to freeze. Boom. The sword fell. People were only able to see a sky full of runes erupt, the ground shatter, and endless waves of dust and earth fly. It was those with the stronger cultivation bases that were appalled. That was because they were the first to sense that the club-bearing corrupt expert's aura had disappeared. And for his aura to disappear now, there was only one possibility. That was that he had been killed. He had still been one-shot despite using his full strength? No one could believe this result. That was a rank 3 celestial, one of the peak experts currently on the immemorial path. But there was no choice but to believe it. When the dust scattered, the corrupt expert's corpse had truly disappeared. Only the scent of blood still lingered in the air. After killing him, Long Chen was also blown back. This was all Shuiyu needed to distance himself. Lei Long Huolong, quickly kill him. Long Chen immediately had a bad feeling. He hastily had Lei Long and Hua Long attack Xueyu. It was too late for him to reach him now. Xueyu was already rapidly forming hand seals. Haha, it's too late. You can die now. Hell poison curse. Xueyu laughed. He had finally obtained the opportunity he had been looking for. Black blood dripped down from his third eye, and a bizarre image appeared in front of him. In the blink of an eye, the mist began to billow toward Long Chen. That black mist was countless tiny runes. When they passed through Lei Long and Hua Long, Lei Long didn't react, but black smoke began to emit from Hua Long's body. This curse is afraid of fire. Long Chen was delighted to see this. But he also didn't dare to be careless. He knew that those curse runes were extremely domineering. Even just getting infected by the slightest bit of them would cause him to be cursed. It had nothing to do with how many he was touched by. Their immense number was just to increase the odds of succeeding. Suddenly, Hua Long disappeared and a huge flame sphere appeared in Long Chen's hand. Little Snow appeared behind Long Chen. He shot out a sphere of wind blades that enveloped Long Chen's flame sphere. The two of them were once more releasing their combined wind flame attack. Boom! When the flames borrowed the power of the wind, their range increased explosively. Those black runes of Xueyu were all incinerated into black smoke. As soon as Xueyu had released the Hell Poison Curse, he had begun forming new hand seals. The Hell Poison Curse was just an irritant. It made poisonous insects appear within a person's blood. It would consume that blood and then become parasites within the body. But that kind of curse could only affect average experts. Xueyu hadn't had any hopes of this curse stopping Long Chen. All he wanted was for it to stall for a bit. While Long Chen wiped away those runes, he would unleash his second curse. Just as Xueyu was about to unleash his second curse, Lei Long appeared by his side. It crazily attacked him, and making it so he was unable to complete the hand seals. In his fury, he unstintingly spent his core runic energy to form a barrier around him. It temporarily held back Lei Long while he continued forming hand seals. When Long Chen released that wind flame combination attack, Xueyu had reached the final stages of his second attack. A blood-red rune appeared in front of his body, and it possessed an extremely corrosive aura. It was an exceedingly powerful weakening curse and was much stronger than the one Long Chen had been afflicted with. Once Long Chen was struck, he would be weaker than a dog. However, this curse required a long time to activate. That time was what the Hell Poison Curse had bought for him. You can die now. Hell Blood Dash, Xueyu shouted, pushing the rune in front of him forward. But before that rune could fly out, a chilling light flashed through Xueyu's back. His neck was directly severed. At the same time, it severed his curse. You really should die now. Long Chen snorted. It really had been too dangerous just now. If he had been the slightest bit slower, the consequences would have been dire. Fortunately, he had made it. After slicing off Xueyu's head, Long Chen didn't hesitate. Flying Rainbow slashed down on Xueyu's head. He would completely kill him. Keep dreaming. Blood Sacrifice Ghost Sword. Xueyu roared furiously. Instantly, his black sword appeared in front of him, and it immediately absorbed all the blood Xueyu was bleeding. Buzz. The black sword rapidly grew to a length of 300 meters. A sinister aura erupted from it as it slashed down on Long Chen. Long Chen was startled. He didn't know how Xueyu had done this, but he had actually activated his treasure item's power. That was beyond imagination. It had to be known that treasure items were weapons for ancestors. Although people like them were capable of using them, they were unable to bring out a treasure item's true power. That power was beyond their ability to control. The huge black sword was surrounded by revolving black chi. What sounded like the cries of millions of ghosts came from it. This sword demanded Long Chen's life. It was unavoidable. Long Chen had never expected Xueyu to possess such a move. In truth, this trump card was something Xueyu would never use unless he had no alternative. He had sacrificed his own blood to activate a trace of his treasure item's power. He had no choice now, or he would die. Just as Long Chen was facing a treasure item's attack, Flying Rainbow suddenly left his hand. It turned into streaking rainbow light that slashed onto the black sword. Boom! The two immense blades collided. When those two immense blades collided, the entire world seemed to become dark. That was because that collision caused heaven and earth to lose all their light. There was no sound for thousands of miles. Long Chen was horrified. Just now, he hadn't done anything at all. It was like Flying Rainbow had been provoked and automatically released its own power in response. As for Shuiyu, his head had already reattached to his body. He was also looking up in horror. He had never imagined that Long Chen could activate a treasure item's power without sacrificing anything. It had to be known that he had sacrificed all the blood from when Long Chen had cut off his head to activate his black sword's power. This black sword was one of the Corrupt Path's treasure items. Shuiyu had been nourishing it for many years, but even he still needed to sacrifice his essence blood to activate it. A treasure item had its own item spirit, its own intelligence, as well as its own pride. According to reason, without reaching at least C expansion, there was no way to activate a treasure item. But there were all sorts of secret arts in this world. For example, Shuiyu had formed a contract with his treasure item. The treasure item felt that its owner was a bit weak, but it depended on his essence blood, so it was willing to listen to his orders. But Shuiyu had still paid a steep price to activate this attack. The majority of his essence blood had been sucked away just now. On the other hand, Long Chen hadn't sacrificed anything, but that sword had voluntarily released its power to fight for him. That kind of treatment was immensely different. Limitless power was colliding in the air. The spectators were all horrified. It looked as if it was the end of the world. They began to hastily flee. Boom! The two blades blossomed with a light brighter than the sun. A terrifying energy was pouring out from the core of the two blades. The light was rapidly growing. In front of that light, mountains were instantly blown to smithereens. Some of the closer experts didn't even have a chance to make a sound before being blown into bloody mist. The two treasure items had released their power. Everything within thousands of miles was razed, and everything that light touched was destroyed. Even Long Chen was wildly vomiting blood. He felt like his body was being torn apart. He was appalled. This was a treasure item's true power? It was truly too terrifying. It was a good thing he had the primal chaos space. His injuries were rapidly healing. With the spirit world's immense trees, he was able to heal even heavenly Dao injuries. After releasing their powerful attack, both treasure items returned to their normal size and flew back to their owners. In that previous collision, there had been no winner. Long Chen didn't wait for Flying Rainbow to return. He shot forward, grabbing it on the way. Shuiyu was in the midst of recovering. He still hadn't recovered from his shock, but the battle-hardened Long Chen wouldn't let this opportunity escape him. Sword light slashed down mercilessly. Shuiyu sensed him immediately, but Long Chen was too fast. He rapidly retreated but was still too slow. Flying Rainbow slashed down, severing his leg. Although Shuiyu had managed to preserve his life, he had lost a limb. Shuiyu was fortunate he was strong enough. When Flying Rainbow had pierced his body, his runes had held back a portion of its power. Otherwise, that slash wouldn't have cut off just one of his legs. Instead, it would have destroyed all his lower body. Heavenly Dao recovered dash. Countless runes flew to that severed leg. Fuck off. Would Long Chen give him that opportunity? He directly grabbed the leg, not letting him reattach it. His sword once more slashed down. Boom. Shuiyu hastily dodged with his sword. As a result, he was sent flying without a leg. Unable to keep his balance, he tumbled across the ground. Hand over your other four limbs as well. Long Chen shot after him, stabbing his sword at him. But when Shuiyu blocked it, Long Chen swung his other hand. A bloody leg slapped across Shuiyu's face. Shuiyu was sent flying by his own leg. He tumbled across the ground, appearing incredibly wretched. Their previous collision of treasure items had killed quite a few of the spectators. But for many of them, it was unlikely they would ever get another chance to see a battle on this level. So there were still quite a few people continuing to watch despite the danger. Seeing Long Chen sever Shuiyu's leg, they felt a chill. He was truly ruthless. Then seeing Long Chen draw Shui Yu's attention with the sword in his right hand only to slap him with his own leg from his other hand, their eyes almost popped out. They had never seen such a fighting style. Long Chen, just wait. I'll repay this enmity to you 1,000,000 times. Not just you, but everyone close to you, your sect. I'll refine all their souls and make it so they can never reincarnate. Shui Yu was forced to desperation by Long Chen. In his fury, he slashed apart the leg in Long Chen's hand. To personally destroy his own leg gave him a sour feeling. Perhaps only Shui Yu could understand that feeling. Although Shui Yu was a rank 3 celestial, regenerating a leg would not only require time, but it would also require a great deal of his core energy. If his body was severed, then he could reconnect it and immediately recover. But if his body had disappeared, there was no way he could reform it instantly. You're still threatening me? Courting a slap. Long Chen furiously attacked, and the only thing remaining in his left hand was a shoe. His sword unleashed a torrent of attacks, forcing the one-legged Shui Yu back miserably. Pow! A clear sound rang out, shaking heaven and earth. Shui Yu spun in circles. By the time he stabilized, the image of a shoe print on his face was extremely clear. Those spectators felt like they were going crazy. The Corrupt Path's supreme expert, the corrupt King Shui Yu, had actually been slapped in the face by a shoe. And furthermore, it was his own shoe. Fuck, your skin really is thick enough. It's thicker than the bottom of a shoe. Looking at the ruined shoe in his hand, Long Chen snorted and tossed it to the ground. He shot forward with his sword. Ah! Shui Yu released a heaven-shaking roar. His hair stood on end, and his eyes were completely scarlet. In all his life, he had never been this furious. This humiliation was something he had never imagined would befall him. Long Chen, just wait. If I, Shui Yu, don't kill you, then I'll swear I'm not human. Shui Yu suddenly spat blood onto his sword. His sword shook and turned into a black ray that shot away with him. Everyone's busy and I don't have time to wait. Let's resolve things now. Long Chen sneered. Lightning wings appeared on his back, and the lightning whirlpools in his body fully activated. Shui Yu was relying on the black sword's speed to get away. He had already realized that if they continued, there was no way for him to win. Although he was a bit unwilling, he had no other choice. But he had only just shot off when he suddenly noticed Long Chen had turned into a bolt of lightning that was chasing him. His speed wasn't the slightest bit lower than his black sword. While chasing, Long Chen raised Flying Rainbow, and Sword Chi slashed forward. Even flying didn't affect his attacks. In truth, Long Chen had realized that the lightning body blink's strongest aspect was its rapid speed in one direction. In battle, he normally only used half of the lightning whirlpools, while the other half were closed. When he moved forward, he would activate the back half, and when he moved back, he would activate the front half. That was to control the direction of his body. But when rushing long distance in one direction, he could turn all the lightning whirlpools to one direction. That pushed his speed to the peak. Even Long Chen felt that moving this fast was a bit terrifying. If he smashed into a solid mountain like this, perhaps he would be crushed to death. But his speed was truly shocking. And he could even unleash attacks while flying. That stunned Shui Yu. He had activated his treasure item to flee. But at this time, his treasure item was only capable of carrying him. He couldn't use it to defend anymore. He hastily and forcibly switched it from its flying mode to its fighting mode to block. Shui Yu blocked Long Chen's attack, but he vomited blood and shot back like a shooting star. He directly pierced through 7 mountains. Those 7 mountains were fine. But there was a hole with the size of Shui Yu in each of them now. Shui Yu continued flying for many miles, continuously vomiting blood. This attack had almost taken his life. He was finally horrified. He was unable to defeat Long Chen, and now he was unable to flee. A sensation of death welled up from his heart. This was his first time feeling this kind of terror. Just at this moment, Long Chen had already caught up. He once more slashed down with his sword. Shui Yu roared furiously. He couldn't just wait for his death. He once more activated his sword, slashing it at Long Chen. Long Chen was forced back hundreds of meters, while Shui Yu was once more sent flying. Long Chen immediately stabilized himself and shot back toward Shuiyu. Despite taking the absolute advantage, he still didn't dare to be careless. Shuiyu possessed exceedingly terrifying curse arts. Once Long Chen was cursed, this advantage of his would vanish. In fact, the situation would very likely reverse. He couldn't give such a powerful expert any opportunity. Long Chen chased, refusing to allow Shuiyu to have time to form hand seals. But just as he was about to catch up to him, he suddenly noticed a woman not far behind Shuiyu. He was startled and hastily stopped, vigilantly staring at her. This woman's aura was exceedingly terrifying, and it made him feel endless pressure. Furthermore, she was wearing the corrupt path's robes. Leng Yuan. Shuiyu let out a startled cry. Leng Yuan. Hearing that name, Long Chen's heart shook. He saw that this woman was wearing scarlet, skin-tight robes which revealed all her curves. Her body had practically reached the pinnacle of perfection. Her long hair fell naturally to her waist. That beautiful face was like a flawless jade. But that jade contained endless iciness. The most unforgettable thing about her was her pair of ocean blue eyes. They were like sapphires, yet also like stars in the night sky. Those eyes were beautiful enough to steal a person's soul. However, those beautiful eyes were chilling to the peak. Endless killing intent poured out of them. Shuiyu turned pale as paper when he saw Leng Yuan. His eyes were filled with endless terror, and he hastily fled from her. A sword came out of its sheath. It was like a bolt of lightning slashing through space to reach Shuiyu. That dumbfounded Long Chen. What was going on? A single slash of Leng Yuan's sword sealed all the space around Shuiyu. She had struck so quickly that even Long Chen hadn't seen how she had moved. Her sword light reached Shuiyu in an instant. Shuiyu had been prepared and fled as soon as he had seen Leng Yuan, but even when he tried to block with his sword, he was unable to keep up with Leng Yuan's demonic speed. His other leg left his body. "You bitch Leng Yuan. And you bastard Long Chen, just wait. Devil eye blood escape." Shuiyu furiously roared. His third eye opened and black blood poured out from it. That blood transformed into runes that wrapped around him. Space twisted, and just like that he escaped from Long Chen and Leng Yuan's sight. This was Shuiyu's life-saving technique. He wouldn't easily use it, because it caused immense injury to his devil eye. In fact, the sequelae might be permanent. But he had no other choice. Seeing that Shuiyu was still able to escape in this kind of situation, Long Chen felt a bit powerless. People on this level really weren't easy to deal with. All kinds of techniques poured out of them endlessly. The only thing that he couldn't figure out was how the corrupt King Shuiyu and the Devil Empress Leng Yuan would fight as soon as they saw each other. Weren't they the corrupt path's top experts? Leng Yuan had clearly been intending on taking Shuiyu's life. Just as he was bewildered by this, he saw Leng Yuan slowly turn back as if Shuiyu's escape wasn't the slightest bit out of her expectations. Her sapphire eyes sparkled with an icy light. Being looked at by those eyes, Long Chen had a sensation that all his secrets were being seen through. Seeing her just looking at him, he felt his hair stand on end. Was this an intimidation tactic? Leng Yuan looked at Long Chen, and Long Chen looked at Leng Yuan. Long Chen was startled to see that Leng Yuan was practically not human. She was just too perfect. There wasn't the slightest flaw on her body. Even her eyebrows seemed to be identical down to the hair. She was like the masterpiece of a god. But this unbelievably beautiful woman possessed a terrifying aura. When looking at her, no one would feel any amicability. It was more like they were staring at a goddess of death that would take their life at will. Only now that Leng Yuan had turned back did Long Chen notice her sword. It sparkled like white jade. It was actually a bone sword. It was unknown whether that bone came from a human or a magical beast. It released a malevolent air as if it had come from hell and thirsted to devour other people's souls. Long Chen quickly scanned all of Leng Yuan's body. But Leng Yuan was still just looking at Long Chen without saying a word. Was she trying to compete in terms of stubbornness? Long Chen's guard was raised. Leng Yuan was an even more terrifying expert than Shuiyu, or Shuiyu wouldn't be so terrified of her. Leng Yueyan continued to look at Long Chen, and he continued to look back at her. But that tense atmosphere was difficult to endure. Although his opponent was a peerless beauty, he couldn't look at her as a woman. She was definitely a vicious character. Long Chen didn't say anything. This was a silent competition. Whoever got impatient first would fall into the disadvantageous position. You are Devil Empress Leng Yueyan? Completely on guard, Long Chen still opened his mouth in the end. Just staying silent like this wasn't a solution. Leng Yueyan was expressionless. Long Chen felt like his robes were being seen through. Her gaze seemed to be able to easily penetrate him. Are you mute? Long Chen frowned. But even such a provocation didn't cause any fluctuations in Leng Yueyan. She is calculating your weakness and habits from your outer form. If you don't take the initiative, her first attack will very likely take your life, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle. What? How could that be possible? The cultivation technique she trains in is different from everyone else. Those eyes of her are called void-piercing eyes. That name comes from how they are able to see through all emptiness, all lies. Through your posture, your movements, the way you hold your sword, how you breathe, your eyes, and even the veins in your muscles, she is able to calculate your habits and find your fatal weaknesses, said the Eastern Wasteland Belle. Long Chen's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected Leng Yueyan to be that terrifying. If it weren't for the Eastern Wasteland Belle's warning, he wouldn't have even realized he was already in a disadvantageous position. He immediately took the initiative. As one of the Martial Heaven Continent's legendary divine items, he knew the Eastern Wasteland Belle wouldn't trick him over something like this. Furthermore, he was also feeling more and more uneasy as if danger was getting closer. His sword slashed forth. Leng Yueyan also moved, her bone sword shooting forward. Her speed was incredible. She had only just moved when her sword reached its peak speed. Long Chen's hand trembled as he almost lost his grip on his sword. His attack was easily blocked. He hadn't expected Leng Yueyan to possess such wrist strength. Using a sword was different from using a saber. A saber relied on brute force, not technique. It relied on using the arm to release the entire body's power. But a sword was much more refined. It relied on subtle changes and variations. It required wrist strength to control those subtle changes, so it had high requirements in that regard. Although Long Chen was using a sword now, in truth, he was simply using his saber techniques. His wrist strength might be strong, but he didn't know anything about controlling those subtle changes. As a result, he immediately lost out in their first exchange. Having his sword blocked, Long Chen immediately knew the situation had turned sour. Leng Yueyan's sword was already piercing toward his chest. That speed was so quick that there was no time to react. Long Chen had never fought an opponent with such rapid attacks. His chest was pierced, but he ignored it. His sword was directly slashing at Leng Yueyan's waist. No matter how he tried or blocked, it would already be too late. If the power in Leng Yueyan's sword was allowed to erupt inside his chest, then even if he didn't die, he would be heavily injured. He could only choose to sacrifice his life to take her life. This was the only method to use when there were no other methods. Leng Yueyan was too fast, so fast that it was practically beyond human limits. By the time you saw her move, you would already be struck. Long Chen's chest erupted as Leng Yueyan extracted her sword and blocked Long Chen's attack. She had timed everything perfectly. This time, sparks flew and a metallic ringing erupted. It was like that bone blade wasn't bone, but metal. Long Chen had used all his power this time, so Leng Yueyan was forced back a few steps. Although Leng Yueyan had an advantage in wrist strength, in absolute power, she still wasn't his match. Divine Ring. Battle Armor. Long Chen instantly erupted with his strongest power. He changed to wielding his sword with two hands, hacking it down at Leng Yueyan. Space rumbled intensely. Long Chen had also seen that Leng Yueyan was a close-range fighter. Her combat experience was extremely profound, while he wasn't used to using a sword. If he fought with technique, he would just be courting death. He would have to use his sword as a saber and fight through brute force. He slashed his sword 3 times, each slash stronger than the last. Gale winds erupted and the ground split apart. Leng Yueyan was forced back hundreds of meters. The blood nether flower blooms, nether gods summoning. Suddenly her scarlet robes began to drift as if flames were raging inside. Endless runes appeared behind her, showing that she was a rank 3 celestial. A huge flower blossomed on Leng Yueyan's forehead. The flower was the shape of a lotus and had 3 colors. At the center, there was a blood-red light. An extremely icy aura flowed down the petals and enveloped Leng Yueyan's body. It was an extremely beautiful scene. She was a peerlessly beautiful woman, and the 3-colored lotus was surrounded by the mist. She seemed indistinct within that mist, appearing like an immortal. But Long Chen didn't find it beautiful. All he felt was shock. He just realized how terrifying Leng Yueyan was. She was truly like a goddess of death. When she looked at him, he couldn't see the slightest human emotion. All he saw was icy killing intent. Leng Yueyan pointed her bone sword at the sky. A huge image of a sword appeared with endless runes within it. Following her actions, her sword suddenly blossomed with light, and that immense image was absorbed into her true sword. Netherworld Ghost Slash. Leng Yueyan's sword mercilessly slashed down at Long Chen. A terrifying aura caused heaven and earth to tremble. Leng Yueyan's sapphire eyes released endless killing intent. Her sword slashed down mercilessly while her terrifying aura caused the world to quiver in fear. Split the heavens too. Long Chen also shouted, his spiritual yuan raging through 18 acupuncture points. Boom. It was like a collision of stars. A blinding light erupted and endless runes were blown apart. Long Chen was appalled. Leng Yueyan was too terrifying. This attack had sent Long Chen flying, and he almost coughed up blood. Just at that moment, Leng Yueyan practically teleported beside him and stabbed her sword at his chest at an extremely tricky angle. What? Long Chen was appalled. What kind of monster was Leng Yueyan? How could she not have been affected by the shockwave of their attacks and could still unleash another attack? But then seeing Leng Yueyan's movement art, he suddenly realized it was a bit familiar. The Netherworld Ghost Steps? Boom. Long Chen instinctively blocked with Flying Rainbow, just barely escaping that bone sword's fatal attack. You know the Netherworld Ghost Steps? This was Leng Yueyan's first time showing any emotion. She was clearly shocked he could shout out her movement art's name. But that shock only lasted for the blink of an eye before she returned to her icy, apathetic self. She once more attacked Long Chen. This time, her movement art appeared even more demonic and ephemeral. When she first swung her sword, she was to Long Chen's left, but in the middle of the attack, her sword suddenly appeared to Long Chen's right. In the end, when the sword was about to strike him, it appeared behind him. Long Chen instinctively slashed his sword behind him without even looking. He perfectly blocked the bone sword. From that one exchange, Long Chen confirmed Leng Yueyan was using the Netherworld Ghost Steps. But her Netherworld Ghost Steps was of a much higher level than the one he had learned. He was barely able to see some clues based on the way she moved and the change in her aura. If it hadn't been for his own experience with the Netherworld Ghost Steps, which allowed him to see through some of her movements, there would have been no way for him to block her practically ghost-like attack from the back. Fuck, that damn old ghost was definitely holding back and only taught me some superficial nonsense, cursed Long Chen. In truth, Long Chen had wrongly blamed Guisha. It wasn't that he hadn't wanted to teach him this higher-level technique, but that his own status wasn't high enough in the corrupt path to learn it. He had only had the qualifications to learn that level of Netherworld Ghost Steps. It had to be known that the Netherworld Ghost Steps was an extremely famous technique in the corrupt path. To be able to learn even the first superficial level of it was already an immense honor, and it was all thanks to that superficial level that Long Chen was able to see through Leng Yueyan's ghost-like attack. Long Chen became covered in thunder force as he activated the lightning body blink. The two of them pushed their speed to their peaks as they underwent an intense battle. One was ghost-like and ephemeral, while one was like rushing lightning. Their two figures moved so quickly that it was impossible to track them with the naked eye. Sword chi filled the sky. It was practically impossible to see their figures anymore. It was a true competition of speed. Long Chen was growing more and more shocked. This Ling Yueyan's power just kept coming. It was no wonder Shui Yu would be so afraid of her. Each one of her attacks was fierce and vicious, with no room for compromise. Furthermore, each one of her moves had clearly been tempered through hundreds and thousands of battles. Her battle experience was shockingly profound. They exchanged almost 1,000 blows. Because they were so fast, it only took an incense stick's worth of time. But within these 1,000 exchanges, Long Chen wasn't able to find the slightest mistake in any of her moves. That didn't mean that her moves were perfect, as there wasn't anything truly perfect in this world. It was just that all her moves linked up to the next, so any openings were made up for. Furthermore, with her rapid attacks and movement, even Long Chen was only barely able to see those openings. But he wasn't able to find any opportunity to counterattack. You're very powerful. Unfortunately, you're unable to release your power. Your movements are too clumsy. If you didn't have such shocking combat instincts, you'd have long since died to my sword. But even so, you have no chance of victory. In less than an hour, you'll die to my sword. Even if you have any powerful moves, you won't be able to use them. Ling Yueyan suddenly opened her mouth, but her sword didn't slow down at all. Long Chen snorted and didn't reply. That was because there was nothing to say. Her words weren't the slightest bit wrong. He wasn't able to release any of his power against her. Although Flying Rainbow was a treasure item, it was too light and it wasn't able to release his true power. His fight with Ling Yueyan was basically a competition of swords, and so he was naturally at an immense disadvantage. Right now, he was simply doing his best to endure. But he definitely couldn't continue like this for long. Ling Yueyan was a terrifying killer, and her combat experience wasn't any less than his own. To release a powerful move against such an expert, it would require an opportunity. That was an extremely large problem for Long Chen now. No matter how strong his techniques were, if he was unable to release them, they wouldn't have any effect. Long Chen had already activated his divine ring and brought himself to his peak state. But Ling Yueyan had also released her full power, and they seemed evenly matched. However, Long Chen knew that if they continued like this, his defeat was inevitable. Ling Yueyan's eyes were too monstrous. Although she wasn't necessarily able to see through everything about him, she had still sensed several of his habits and weaknesses. She had seen through the fact that he wasn't used to using a sword, and her plan was to use that to kill him with the smallest price. Suddenly, countless golden runes appeared around Long Chen. Ling Yueyan's first thought was that Long Chen was preparing to release some kind of powerful move, but when she clearly saw what those golden runes were, she was startled. Those were the hidden ground gold Spider King scales. They formed a golden sea that surged toward Ling Yueyan. After being nourished within Long Chen's spiritual space for so long, these scales were no different from ordinary enchanted items to him. He could use them as he pleased. Even Ling Yueyan wasn't able to disregard this many enchanted weapons. Her body wasn't able to endure how sharp those scales were. Her sword danced within that sea of scales. Those incomparably sharp scales, which even enchanted items would find difficult to damage, were blown to bits whenever they touched Ling Yueyan's sword. Split the heavens too. Long Chen had no choice but to unleash a full-strength attack. If this continued, all those scales would be destroyed by Ling Yueyan. Those were his best treasures for group battles. Boom. Ling Yueyan was enveloped by the scales and couldn't escape, so she could only take it head-on. As a result, she was sent flying. A good opportunity. Raging Flame Prison. Long Chen hastily formed hand seals. Space quivered as endless flame runes appeared around Ling Yueyan, trapping her. Her expression suddenly changed as she sensed danger. Her sapphire eyes suddenly shot out two rays of light that were like two blades piercing the void. Heaven Netherworld slash. Ling Yueyan's bone sword suddenly blossomed with light. A ray of sword chi slashed onto one of the flame chains of the raging flame prison. Boom. Long Chen was appalled to see that her attack actually managed to sever the flame chain. Before the flame prison could completely form, she charged out. Long Chen immediately understood what the Eastern Wasteland Bell had meant. Ling Yueyan's void-piercing eyes were too powerful. As the user of the Raging Flame Prison, Long Chen naturally knew its weak point. The main one was that when the flame prison had yet to fully form, it was in its weakest state. When the prison was first formed, the core flame runes would condense pillars. Those pillars would then condense the flame chains, and those flame chains would be formed of countless smaller runes. Those runes were formed of heaven and earth's purest flame energy. Long Chen used his own flame energy to control them and keep them linked. In truth, each flame chain had a fatal weakness. That weakness was Long Chen's flame energy. When the flame prison first formed, he had to adhere his own flame energy on top of the runes in order to connect them into their prison form. Furthermore, his flame energy had to rapidly circulate throughout the entire prison, because that was the only way to keep the flame prison operating. His flame energy would be wrapped around by heaven and earth's flame energy, making it so others couldn't sense it. But the void-piercing eyes saw through it all. Not only did she see through it, but Leng Yuan had also shattered his flame energy at its weakest point, shattering the chain and escaping. Long Chen groaned, coughing up blood. Having his flame prison be instantly destroyed as soon as it began to form, he suffered an extremely powerful backlash. It was fortunate that the earth flame was very strong. The reverse flow of the world's flame energy was blunted by it, allowing Long Chen to only suffer a slight injury. Fuck, how is she so difficult to deal with? Raged Long Chen as he looked up at the godlike Leng Yuan. The lotus flower rune was shining on her forehead. Leng Yuan had just rushed out of the raging flame prison, and the sword in her hand pointed several times. Following that, it looked as if the void had been pierced. A scarlet liquid flowed out as if the void was bleeding. That scarlet liquid immediately transformed into blood-colored runes. When Leng Yuan pointed the third time, Long Chen suddenly felt a chill. An extremely bad feeling arose in his heart. She was also planning on releasing one of her ultimate moves. Double Dragon Destruction. Long Chen directly summoned Lei Long and Hua Long. On the fifth time, Leng Yuan pointed with her sword, half of a blood-colored figure appeared in the void. Heaven and earth transformed, seeming to become a hell on earth. Boom. But only half of that figure's body had appeared before the two dragons crashed into it. Blood-colored runes exploded and Leng Yuan quivered, a trace of blood flowing out of the corner of her mouth. She had finally been injured. Sorry, don't blame me for being vicious to a woman. The runes filling the air exploded. Long Chen's figure appeared in front of Leng Yuan, his sword stabbing into her chest. The blood-colored runes in the air disappeared and the terrifying pressure vanished. The scene of a hell on earth also silently faded, and the world returned to calm. The ground had been shattered and ruined beyond belief. In the air, two figures were floating next to each other. Long Chen's sword was stabbed through Leng Yuan's chest. Blood dripped off from the tip of the sword, and each drop landed on the ground, becoming scarlet flowers. Previously, you were intentionally hiding your powerful explosive strength? Leng Yuan looked at that sword piercing her chest, and a flash of comprehension appeared in her eyes. She had been misled by Long Chen. When Long Chen had fought with her, she had suppressed him in terms of speed. She had felt that she had already seen through his attack style. But she was wrong. Long Chen hadn't held back while fighting previously. But the only thing that he hadn't revealed was the lightning body blink's greatest superiority, its explosive speed. In truth, in terms of level, the lightning body blink was probably a far cry from Leng Yuan's Netherworld Ghost Steps. If he hadn't already learned the Netherworld Ghost Steps foundation, there would have been no way for him to keep up with her for so long. There was only one aspect in which the lightning body blink could surpass the Netherworld Ghost Steps, and that was the instant eruption of speed. The Netherworld Ghost Steps required increasing the speed gradually, but the lightning body blink could do it instantaneously. The blink in the technique's name referred to instantly reaching the peak speed. Other people wouldn't have Long Chen's speed even if they cultivated the lightning body blink. That was because Long Chen's thunder force came from heavenly tribulation, so it was incomparably powerful. Previously, against Leng Yuan he had been in danger several times, and he had been willing to suffer injury rather than reveal that explosive speed. It was to wait for an opportunity. And that opportunity had come. Opportunities were all created, and they were always left to those who prepared. This opportunity had been grasped by Long Chen. His sword had pierced Leng Yuan's chest. As long as he willed it, his spiritual yuan would erupt, and Leng Yuan would instantly become a fallen beauty. Her life and death were in his hands. You're very powerful. I had no choice but to use a scheme. Although I usually dislike using schemes to resolve problems, when martial might is unable to handle things, I can only rely on some smarts to make up for it, said Long Chen. Leng Yuan was too powerful, so powerful that it was terrifying. She was like a goddess of death with no weak points. In truth, using this move to kill her made Long Chen a bit ashamed. Leng Yuan's sapphire eyes looked into Long Chen's eyes. She seemed to have seen through his heart and actually smiled. You don't need to feel ashamed. You should be proud. This is my first time being injured since I was 5 years old. The corrupt path's geniuses that have fallen to my hands are enough to form a huge mountain. In all these years, you're the one who has had the greatest chance to kill me. Congratulations. Leng Yuan had always been so emotionless, but now suddenly seeing her smile, it was like the blooming of a flower. It was incredibly moving, and Long Chen hastily focused himself on his sword so he wouldn't get distracted. The only thing he didn't understand was that even with her death at hand, Leng Yuan seemed extremely happy. It was like death was something worth celebrating for her. He could see the excitement in her eyes. That was clearly her inner emotion, so he was puzzled. Drip, drip. Blood continued to drip from the sky. The sound was like the overture of death, causing the atmosphere to be strange. The feeling of being injured is excellent. I really like this feeling. And I like feeling so close to death even more. This feeling is so wonderful. But regretfully, in all these years, the number of people that could give me this feeling was pitifully low. Long Chen, you're a real man. You arouse me. An extremely rare tender light appeared in Leng Yuan's eyes. Combined with her words, Long Chen's scalp immediately turned numb. Although he had experienced much in this world, he had never seen someone like this who actually wanted to die but couldn't run into any experts to kill them. That coward Shui Yu, he was never able to satisfy my desires. Long Chen, you're much stronger than him. Leng Yuan looked at him, smiling. Are you finished with your last words? If you are, then sorry, but we're all very busy. I don't have that much time to waste, said Long Chen coldly. Although Leng Yuan was a peak beauty, Long Chen had a profound understanding of just how terrifying this beauty was. He definitely wouldn't be soft-hearted to her and do something as melodramatic as to spare her life in hopes that she would give her heart to him. Just thinking of that would be idiotic. This kind of woman could not be subdued. Why don't you just let me experience this moving feeling for a bit longer? This feeling is too rare. Leng Yuan shook her head, unwilling to have things end so quickly. Sorry. A slightly disturbed feeling arose within Long Chen. Personally, killing a practically godlike beauty wasn't something that made him feel good. But in order to live longer, Long Chen still released the volcanic energy within his sword. But that immense power that could easily destroy mountains was locked down by a strange energy. It was unable to erupt. At the same time, a burst of pain came from his chest. Leng Yuan's bone sword had pierced his chest in the same place his sword was piercing hers. You've stabbed me and I've also stabbed you. Now you can experience that moving feeling with me. Leng Yuan smiled excitedly. Long Chen immediately didn't dare to move. Leng Yuan's sword also contained a berserk energy. As long as she wished it, he would immediately be blown to pieces. Are you very curious? Seeing Long Chen's shock, Leng Yuan lightly rubbed his cheek, a trace of warmth in her sapphire eyes. You're the only man to injure me in the same realm. So I'll tell you a secret that only I know in this world. My bloodline comes from a supreme existence. My bloodline power is even greater than my combat power. You are unable to kill me. Long Chen, you're a true man. Thank you for giving me this delightful feeling. To thank you, I'll let you die painlessly. A terrifying aura began to erupt from Leng Yuan's sword as soon as she finished speaking. Long Chen roared, and he circulated the thunder force and the earth flame's energy within his body. He forcibly sealed the energy on Leng Yueyan's sword. He had learned from her. Leng Yueyan's blood had actually released a powerful defense that had blocked his sword's energy from erupting. It was like ignited gunpowder that had been extinguished by ice water. Copying her, he used his thunder force and flame energy to tightly lock Leng Yueyan's sword. That was all he could do now. Originally, when Leng Yueyan's energy was about to erupt, the Eastern Wasteland Bell had been about to help. But seeing Long Chen suddenly come up with such a crazy thought, imitating his opponent's bloodline force, it stopped. Leng Yueyan's energy was locked within her sword. As a result, Long Chen was pushed back by her sword, and blood trickled out of his mouth. Although he had imitated Leng Yueyan's technique, he was unable to do it perfectly. A portion of that power had still leaked out and injured his insides. Leng Yueyan was shocked. However, her sword continued pushing toward Long Chen, and the two of them still maintained their original posture with both swords in their chests as they flew through the air. Don't be afraid. Death is something instantaneous. You don't need to struggle, as that will just make you more afraid and pained. Leng Yueyan shook her head. Long Chen didn't reply. He was completely focused on circulating his thunder force and flame energy, locking Leng Yueyan's energy. He couldn't let it erupt within him, or he would definitely be dead. He struggled with his life on the line. His head was rapidly working, trying to think of a way to escape his current crisis. But Leng Yueyan was too powerful. Now that she had grabbed hold of this opportunity to kill him, there was no chance she would let go. Just like that, Long Chen struggled with his life on the line, while Leng Yueyan also followed him. Suddenly, both their expressions changed. A terrifying pressure crashed down on them. Not good. Leng Yueyan's expression changed. At some unknown point, the two of them had flown over an abyss. The space around them was starting to twist. A terrifying battle had once occurred in the immemorial path. The ground had shattered, and some of the large cracks still contained the laws from the battle back then. Once those laws were touched, the only possibility was death. Leng Yueyan could no longer bother with killing Long Chen. The wings on her back shook and she flew back. Long Chen also regained his freedom, but he had a bad feeling. He was appalled to realize that this abyss was thousands of miles wide. It was the largest abyss he had seen, and the two of them were already dozens of miles into it. They were in an extremely dangerous position. The two of them were just about to leave this place when space twisted. A powerful suction force suddenly came from below. The darkness was like a huge mouth wanting to devour them. Both of them realized the space around them had frozen. They were unable to go up or even fly anymore. They could only fall. The two of them struggled as hard as they could, but that suction force was too strong. They could only watch as they fell. In just a moment, they were miles below ground. Because they were unable to control their falling direction, the two of them ended up getting closer and closer. In the end, when they were practically right next to each other, Leng Yueyan's sword suddenly slashed at Long Chen. Fuck, you still want to kill at this time? Was your head kicked by a donkey? Cursed Long Chen. Even at this time, she didn't think about escaping. In his fury, he didn't bother overthinking it. Flying Rainbow also unleashed a torrent of attacks against Leng Yueyan. They began to fall even faster. The sky was just a line in their sight now. At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly rose within the abyss. That aura surged like a furious tide, instantly enveloping the two of them. Long Chen's expression involuntarily changed. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.